All right, if I'm live, I need to have a mic check. If somebody could give me a 5x5, if you can actually hear me okay. I'll turn the volume down back here to the comment section. So can everybody hear me okay, or do you see me or anything? Okay, maybe nobody can hear me. I'd pull you in, Mark. I'll pull you in just a second. Okay. Okay, so is that a yes, you can hear me, or just a yes, you can see me? Let me know if you can hear me 5x5, and then I'll pull up Mark here in just a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, tonight want to welcome. I haven't been on in a while, so I just want to say apologize for that. I am working on a different investigation at the moment that has been kind of secret that I'll get into at some point in time. But I'll allude to that probably later in this broadcast to let you guys know what's going on. I do want to bring on board. This is Mark Bullock. He is an author. And I'll let him tell you guys what we plan to talk about tonight and a little bit about himself. So here comes Mark. You ready? Here we go. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, Mike. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. Everybody hear Mark okay? I'm going to assume they can. So anyway, I met Mark a few months ago. He contacted me. Well, actually, Mark, you tell us how we met.
Shall I explain about the truck also, Mike?
I'm sure that would be coming up. I'm never going to live that one down, but definitely bring that up. That's fine.
Okay, so my name's Mark Bullock. I'm a former British soldier, now living in America. The last few years, I've been working on a book of sorts, charting the evolution of the mass shootings in the US. And from that, obviously, 1 October is one of the mass shootings I've looked at due to the severity of the casualties and everything else. From there, I had reached out to Mike for some research material because he seemed to be all over the case and seemed to be knowing what was going on. From there, we built up a rapport, and then we met in Florida 3 months ago, Mike.
Truck. Yeah, here comes the truck. Go ahead.
So, after meeting, Mike and I were on the way to a premiere of, was it The Money Machine, Mike?
Yeah, Money Machine.
And I can't even remember what highway it was, but we're going down the highway and the truck suddenly died on us, which so got pushed off the highway to a gas station, and the guy just abandoned us.
He did.
So bear in mind, I'd only ever met Mike in person for like 10 minutes at this point, and then I had to kindly push his truck around the corner of a gas station. And that was quite a funny instance, which me and Mike have a laugh about every now and again.
It was. There's more to it than that. What's so funny too is the guy that came to help us. He hoodwinked me on this gas that he was supposedly putting in the truck. He's basically sold me 5 gallons worth of gas, and he says he can't. I don't have to pay for it, but tips would be customary. So I gave the guy $20. And when he put the can up, I didn't hear any gurgle or nothing going on. So I knew he had hoodwinked us and what have you. So off to the premiere we went, and then at the end of the premiere, we had a question and answer session. And no, Tony, I'm not back in Vegas. I'm actually in Florida. But yeah, so we went to the premiere of Money Machine, and during at the end of the premiere, we got to sit around and take some questions from some people that were there, and that was pretty interesting. And that is when Mark impressed me really fast at his knowledge of the case. As we had talked back and forth. When he first talked to me, I wasn't sure exactly how much he knew of what was going on in the case. But each time we talked, it was more and more and more. And then on some subjects, he knew more than I did. So I sat back and, bowed down. And it was pretty impressive because I hadn't met the guy before, and he comes out of the clear blue, and here he is. And just like for you guys, here is this guy out of the clear blue, but he's very knowledgeable. In a few minutes, we'll take some questions from everybody. But for right now, I'll get back to him. But if you do a question, just remember to type it in all caps, so I know it's a question for us and not a question between you guys. So Mark, tell us what you said you're writing a book or two, or what are you doing? What's up with the books?
Yeah, so as you know, there's a bit of a snag on both of the books because we need one integral piece of information, which I hope we can get that resolved in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
So the first book, as I say, we're going to primarily, well, it depends which order it comes out in. We might do the 1 October book first because that would seem to be the most interesting, so to speak, because I had found certain holes within the case. And due to my research, I was able to speak to people that were open and honest. And they shed a whole new light on it for me. As Mike said earlier, there were certain things that not even he knew of the case. And he's been involved with this since, when did you first come involved with this, Mike? 2000?
First day.
Yes, the first day. Yep. So, it's one of those things where, 1 October, it's a horrific incident that occurred, and had the full truth been known at the time and not just parts of it, then I think there wouldn't have been as many conspiracy theories and conjecture as there is now. I mean, the official narrative is one which you could, the holes in that you could drive a bus through. There's certain instances which transpired which no one ever really knew why they transpired in the aftermath. There was just never any clear reasoning, and
there just seemed to never be any explanations at all. It seemed like when they came out, they gave us just enough to keep us, entertained almost.
Yeah.
But they would never go into any depth, and it was just that is what spurred a lot of the conspiracies because of the lack of information created a bunch. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So from there, during my research, I turned up some new evidence. Well, not exactly evidence, but it was just facts that were already in the public domain, for want of a better word, that previous researchers had been able to get their hands on. And I don't think anyone could ever make the correlation between the information itself and what relevance it actually had to certain instances within the 1 October incident. Because again, a lot of the researchers that I've met, excluding Mike, are just general, normal, everyday people who have a genuine interest in the case. And they're trying to get answers for the victims, just like I am. And so they couldn't quite match up the dots in certain respects. Mike, even though he had an in-depth knowledge, knows a lot about the case, but certain facts he didn't even know because he never really, I think you said to me you had dealt more with the legal side than the actual police side. So tonight was more of just to give you guys a tease of what's been found and give a bit more insight into how the case has progressed, and maybe actually clear up some unanswered questions for a lot of you.
Well, one of the questions I think that we can probably address right away would be, you pretty much have a lot of good information on Campos and about that particular timeline, which in the very beginning was perhaps, and probably still to this day, was one of the biggest issues, especially when they were talking about the timeline of when shots were fired down the hallway versus, hit him coming up the stairs, whether we went up to 33 and down to 30, all these different issues that all surround around this guy. And then he goes to do 5 interviews and then cancels all those, and he ends up on the Ellen DeGeneres show. So all of these different things that revolved around this guy, which created a mystery. But you came up with some pretty good information as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, when I was doing the initial research for the primary book I was going to release first, into 1 October, I came across Campos's police interview that was transcribed, and it was just a joke. So, for a guy that can be seen as an integral eyewitness, gave a 15-minute interview, that ran to 14 pages, and at one point you can tell he was being very evasive. So with my various backgrounds and everything else, I'd noticed certain telltale signs where I wouldn't wholeheartedly say he was being coached, but I think in some respects there was an element of a secondary game, for want of a better word, that he was playing, which, led me to peel back the layers of his story from my own reckoning. And I don't think I'm going to be far wrong on this one, but he's missing between 15 and 20 minutes of his timeline, which has never been fully explained. And as Mike pointed out, there may be a valid reason. I'll just do a screen share so I can show you,
absolutely,
walk you through stuff.
Let me know when you get the right screen on. I'll pull it in.
You should see it now, Mike.
I gotcha. I'm adding it now. There we go.
Okay. So this is Campos's very first police statement actually given on the morning of the 2nd of October at 2:35 in the morning. On the face of it, it's very comparable to other victim statements, and it's brief, very brief. Because, by this point, he would have been up for almost 18 hours, I think I calculated it. And again, he was wounded. I mean, there was no, he genuinely was injured. He was not as severely injured as what, I think he claimed on the Ellen DeGeneres show, but he did have some minor boo-boo.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would have been on some type of pain medications. That's what I put this down to. And, it's very brief. The only difference really between this statement and his transcribed interview is his transcribed interview is not as confusing. So, but I let that go. And this is the official timeline. This is where it really piqued my interest, because it states here that Campos received the call initially at 21:18 to attend the room at 3:21:129. Then when I was walking through the timelines and everything else, and I'd even gone to the hotel myself and walked a similar route several times, I suddenly realized that either Campos was crawling the corridors to get to his desired location, or there was something majorly wrong with the timeline. Which was quite surprising when I discovered a handwritten note within the police evidence that stated the radio transmissions were actually not synced to the correct time. They were about 30 minutes out. Mm-hmm. And the security officer who had tried to sync them had done their best, but they really couldn't get them to match up with the timings of the cameras or anything like that.
Right.
So, we can only guess if these times are correct, but they're not. Because if you look here, he allegedly left, got on the service elevator at 21:46 and got off on the 30th floor at 21:47. And when you look at that time, it's very deceiving, because that basically means within 20 minutes he was being shot at. Mm-hmm. While actually, according to the police, according to the official narrative, he was getting off the elevator on the 32nd floor by the time he had done his marathon, shall we say, around the building. But there was a security log that gave it all away and said he was cleared the open door at 21:59.
Right.
And if for anyone that's not familiar with the hotel, this is how close he literally was to the shooter's room and the door that he had to access to view the bracket. So this is on the left is a photograph I took when I was doing my investigation. And this is from the actual crime scene on the night. This room service car, this is on 3 floors below the actual floor the incident occurred on. And Campos would have literally been stood right there where that cursor is. Yeah. So you can see he is less than 2 feet away from the service cart. So that would put him roughly about in this corner of the picture here.
Now, wasn't there an issue where he claimed he never remembered seeing a service cart?
And as soon as I saw this room service cart wasn't actually staged. This one on the left. I was genuinely walking back to my my room, and genuinely saw it down the corridor, and it just suddenly jumped out at me, and I was like, "That is so similar. That is just really odd."
Right.
So I went down and had a look and took some measurements, and there is literally between the corner of that cart and where Campos was stood is exactly 8.5 feet. When he walked past the cart, as you can see, that's the wall. That's the doorway Campos entered. Mm-hmm. So then, at that point, it was like, hang on, how could he not see this cart here? So then I spoke to various researchers, and they said, well, he works in a hotel, and it would be commonplace for these things to be lying around the hotel. Yes, but Campos admitted in his own words, this had been the first time in about 6 months he had actually worked in what they call the towers. So Campos wouldn't be used to be seeing room service carts littering the hallways. And on top of that, this plate here was turned over by a police officer, not by the shooter. So Campos would have actually seen the camera, because that camera's quite big. It's virtually the size of a fist. So again, a lot of a lot of things started to, fall into place and suddenly sink in and say, well, either Campos was hiding something or he didn't want to admit something. And me and Mike had a very long discussion about this.
Yeah, one of the original, when these images came out, when the builder images came out and some other images, I had taken the initial images that were timed to be, shortly after the shooting, and then some of the ones that were taken a little bit later. That cart had all kinds of different things. There was a water bottle on it, then the water bottle was off. Then there was a plate on it, then the plate was moved, and another plate was turned over the camera. All these different things. I was kind of interested at the time at the bullet holes that had gone through the drapery there, whatever you want to call it, the whatever. Well, I mean on the cart. I was trying to see if he had fired into that, and there was a couple of holes. And as I was looking at it, that's when I noticed the difference. So I put up two pictures side by side, and just that old game you used to play when you see in a magazine, which name the differences between these two pictures. And there was too many. There's so many that you start to wonder, okay, well, if that's bad. Now this is before we had the inside images of the crime scene. If it's that bad on that cart that's in the hallway, God, how bad is it going to be inside the crime scene with all this stuff moved around? So then forward on we went. So go ahead there, Mark.
Yeah, so I mean, there is reasons as to why the crime scene wasn't left in situ. I mean, one of the biggest telltale signs why the room was searched thoroughly before the scene of crimes officers got in there is because of this little gem right here. If you read here, it says British diplomats and they are shouting in place. And this was an hour after the incident, but they'd actually been removed. And they were actually, there was two groups of British diplomats. There was one on the 39th floor, and then there was another group actually in the Harvest Festival.
Right.
And that's, again, another reason why a lot of cameras were turned off by LVMPD officers, because these diplomats have various entourages that follow them everywhere. They believed it may have been an assassination attempt. And so to move people around certain places and not have them visible, they had to turn the body cameras off. I'm waiting for classification as to exactly who these people were. And hopefully I'll have it in time for the book so I can publish it. But from my understanding, they were very senior members of the British establishment.
Right.
So, that's one of the inconsistencies. People, I mean, Mike had even said it to me, why did they turn the cameras off? It doesn't make sense. Well, when you've got half the world's intelligence agencies running up a road because they believe it may be an assassination attempt, they don't want their, what they call spooks or spies, whatever you want to call them, being seen on camera.
Right.
It sort of gives the game away if ever they have to operate undercover.
That it does.
So that was one reason. That was one thing that I was quickly able to put to bed, so to speak, and say, hey, there was a genuine reason to why the cameras were turned off.
Right. So my understanding is the security detail from these diplomats, they were able to go into Mandalay Bay. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So when they went that direction, that's what we see when you see all the officers lined up and the female officer walks around and says, cameras off, you shoot your cameras off, make sure your camera's off, blah, blah, blah. She kept going on. And what that was for was to hide the identities of the people that were going to pass them and go in. Now, originally we thought, well, we all tried to speculate. We thought, well, maybe they don't want to reveal some tactics, some tactical things that they may be doing. But it was a little bit after the fact, that's what was confusing me. I've seen it before where they turn body worn cameras off when they're in their preliminary stages of setting up, going into a facility or what have you, and they might reveal some tactics. They don't want to do that. So that's when they turn them off then. And so that was the original excuse I thought was the most likely. But this, now after talking to you for a few months or whatever, it makes a whole lot more sense that obviously someone was there that they didn't want anyone to know who that was or to see that. Okay. And how did you initially figure that out? You found it on this sheet, but
I was literally just going through the police logs, and it was just in there, and I was like, British diplomats? I wonder who they were. As you can see, it quite clearly states that they're in room 39113 on the 39th floor.
Right.
You can see right there. So they obscured the name so you can't see exactly who they were. Originally, I actually thought they may have related to the British soldiers that were in the arena in the event, because one British soldier was awarded a Queen's Commendation for bravery for his acts that night. But actually, it wasn't, because they wouldn't class them as diplomats.
Right.
So, and they wouldn't be sheltering in place within the hotel that everything was going on. Because again, we know the soldiers in question were actually in the Route 91 festival. So, through various requests and everything else, I got an official nod that yes, this is accurate. There was a group of people visiting Vegas at the time for various means. Because what people don't realize is just outside of Vegas, there's a military establishment that all the 98% of the drone attacks at least are coordinated from and flown from. What's the name of the base, Mike? It escapes my memory right now.
Nellis, the Air Force.
Yeah, Nellis. Yeah, and it's a joint NATO establishment. So you've not just got British personnel there; you've got a lot of Americans, obviously, and
it's a training base too. A lot of people come in for different air training for desert type tactics and field training. So they come in we trained Saudis there. That was a big issue. Like 2 weeks before, they had a helicopter team that was there. Of course, that's part of the helicopter theory thing. But so forth. But go ahead.
So from there, it was a process of elimination. So again, a lot of dignitaries will visit the area for various means. That's one reason. That's one theory I was able to quickly debunk. And then, there was a whole host of other theories where people thought the shooter was connected to ISIS, and that's another reason why the cameras were turned off, because there was a lot of U.S. intelligence personnel also on the ground for various reasons. And, because they needed to genuinely debunk these as fast as possible. And that's why the police did a half-assed job, so to speak, because once the intelligence agencies had done their thing and said, there was no connections to terrorism, and this guy wasn't a homegrown terrorist or a lone wolf or anything like that, the police pretty much put everything to bed as quick as they could. Left a lot of answers in their wake, a lot of questions in their wake, and didn't bother answering them. As we all saw, the timeline changed 3 times. And again, that was another thing that aroused my curiosity, is how can they change the time of someone being shot 3 different times? Because surely there would be some form of firm evidence as to why, as to what time he was shot.
Right.
Again, we know 2159 comes from the internal log of the hotel. 2115. Where did that time actually come from, Mike? I can't remember now. That escapes me right now.
15 was the initial time on the sheet you showed earlier.
That's correct. Yeah. And they claim that that's the time he was shot, but then they changed it to 2106. And at 2106, there seemed to be a lot of, if we go back to the actual,
it would have been 1 minute or seconds into the shooting.
Yeah, within 2206, as you can see, there is a lot of bullet points. When Mike did a 3D animation, and that was that sound studio one, Mike.
That was actually Mr. Visual did that on.
That's right, Mr. Visual.
But yes, that was done, and there was after that I did more analysis on the audio, and I was able to single out more shots as to how many were fired before the actual rounds and volleys started. But go ahead.
But the times just didn't sync with the shots being fired.
Correct.
So it was like, how could this crazed shooter, in the space of 1 minute, fire hundreds of rounds into an arena, turn around and fire at the door, and then turn around? It just didn't make sense. And then when Mike and I was talking the one day, I'd had a rough idea that there was Campos may have been shot at another time, but I didn't quite know when. And Mike was telling me about a section of footage from, I think it was Corey Langdon, Mike.
Correct.
And you can hear the muffled shots at 2110. And this would have been this time here, where the shooter fired down the hallway. Putting various other pieces of intelligence together and information, it actually turns out the person who claimed to be next to the shooter's room actually wasn't the person who was there. But there was a person in 32132, I think it was.
Yeah. The original person was Brian Hodge. He's the one that claimed that he was in the room next to him and I called him, and when he was doing an interview, and I actually told him, I said, you were not in that room. You're actually in a different room. So I gave him the room number. That was back when Laura Loomer brought that out. Yeah. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I actually managed to find a statement from the guy that actually was in the next door room, with the help of, I'll actually give her credit, my wife, she helped me decipher what he had actually written on a statement because it wasn't very clear. Then I'd managed to come across the actual police statement, which gave more details. And the guy was adamant that the shooter had only fired 2 bursts down the hallway within a few seconds of each other. Which, when you look at the door, I've got that here somewhere.
Now, just so everybody knows, I just want to clarify something here and tell me if I won't go into detail or whatever, but you have had access, much like myself in some regards, but a little bit higher access to a lot of information that everyone in here. So when he says something that's not necessarily on the FIT report, what he's referring to also is things he's seen with his own eyes, different information that he's had access to. So go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the door to the shooter's room taken from a still of a body camera. I think this was from Bisco's camera. So you can see these were actually the shots they believe were fired at Campos, and these were the ones fired at the engineer. There's a total of 34 rounds that were fired through the door, but the guy was adamant in the room 32132, which would have been, let me just go back to the hallway pictures, wherever they are there, which would have been roughly about here. So on this picture, it would be just off to the right-hand side.
The odd numbers are on the left side. The even numbers are on the right. Yeah.
And the guy was adamant that there was only 2 bursts of fire down the hallway within a few seconds of each other.
Right.
Not 10 minutes, not 6. Well, I think it works out to like 4 or 5 minutes apart, according to the official timeline. So again, how the police missed that, God only knows. But this seems, I'll show the other one that I was talking to you about a couple of months ago, Mike, of the weapons that they mislabeled.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we'll get into that. I'll bring that up in a minute because that's a blatant, obvious screw up on their part.
So yeah, I mean, the timeline just didn't match. So when I devised my own timeline, there was actually about 15 to 20 minutes where Campos was never accounted for. This is where people are going to start saying, well, maybe he was involved. No, he wasn't. My theory, genuinely, and I think it's going to prove out to be true, and the reason why people have tried to keep him quiet is because he actually surveyed the cart before he went into this area. And the shooter, for reasons unknown, never noticed what Campos was doing, and only actually saw Campos a few minutes later when he emerged from this door. But Campos, I believe, left this doorway about 10:09 p.m. and seconds before the engineer walked up the hallway. So Campos actually didn't leave this doorway whatsoever after he went into it for at least 10 minutes. Because
when he said he was laying on the floor and he called on the house phone and then his cell phone and then on the radio, there was a lot of contention there.
Yeah, there's a lot of, because when you read statements from people who actually spoke to Campos that night, because there's a phone just on the other side of that door, not one person mentions any sounds heard in the background, which would be quite unusual because bearing in mind the shooter was just the other side of the wall firing hundreds of rounds, less than 20 feet away from him. Mm-hmm. When you've got people 3 or 4 floors down that can hear the sounds, you would reasonably expect someone on the end of the other phone right next to the room to hear it.
Right.
So that places Campos off the phone before the shots were fired. And if my times are correct, I think he would have put the phone down around about the time when the shooter was firing individual shots across the venue. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, he's already seen the car outside the door. He already knows there's cameras on there. The L-shaped bracket on the door. He's now petrified, and he just basically just stayed in that room.
Right. From 10:08 to 10:09, that's when the single shots were fired from room 134. There were 6 shots fired at that time, and then 2 more shots fired at the very end of the volleys. Yeah,
so that would be the idea that he would stay in there because obviously he's sheltering in place. And I think at one point he suddenly realized if the shooter did leave the room, and that was an exit strategy for him, Campos was going to be right in the line of fire again. So he made a break for it, I believe, around about 10 past 10. Or between 9 minutes past 10 and 10 past 10. And as he was coming past here, the shooter was either reloading or doing something and spotted Campos on the internal monitors to the room.
Now, why do you think it's significant whether or not it was a minute off or 2 minutes off or 3 minutes off of where Campos was at any given time?
Well, because if you can get a more accurate timeline, it gives a better overview and a lot more closure, because Campos has always been hailed as some type of hero that he actually wasn't, in my opinion. There were far more heroic people that night than a security guard who is, set for the rest of his life when victims are still fighting for justice.
Right.
So just for the, just for the sheer accuracy and closure to the victims, it's they need this information. And that's why I've always pursued Campos, is because, he is integral to this, because they base the timeline off his movements. So if you can't get his movements timed correctly, then you can't get a decent timeline.
Right.
So yeah, that's the whole Campos thing in a nutshell. I'm not going to go on to what we've discussed about prior to all of this, Mike, because there's a few things I'm still working on that, and I might have a nugget of information in the book that's not previously been released.
Understood. And there's some of the things we've discussed that I'll try my best not to.
Yeah.
But so
yeah, that's the whole Campos thing wrapped up in a nutshell. His timeline is 15 to 20 minutes out. Either he had a teleporter or he ran like Usain Bolt. I can't quite determine which one yet, because let's say when I walked a similar route, I still couldn't even get the same timings as him.
Right.
In fact, I actually crawled up one of the hallways just to prove a point. And I figured out I could actually crawl up a hallway faster than he could walk up it, which, I know he was in no great hurry that night, but again, it was always an integral part to the overall incident, because Campos was always seen as an integral figure for some reason.
Right.
If you can crack the Campos affair, you can crack the case, so to speak. So that's why I focused on him. And then, that's the biggest, one of the biggest aspects. There's a lot more to that, as you know, Mike, and that'll be coming out in the book. I don't want to give too much away right now.
Right.
Because I'm still developing certain aspects to, because the way that I'm looking at the book is not your conventional dirt throw-in, stereotypical, true crime novel, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, as if it was a court of law. So that way,
it's much the same way I did when I would gather the evidence while I was there. I was very careful as to, because I knew after the first piece of evidence I gave to the attorneys, I knew, okay, well, now I'm going to go get more evidence. I need to document everything I do and to keep it close to the chest. So I understand.
Yeah. So it's I'm not doing this to make a name for myself. I'm doing it to add closure to the victims, because there are countless victims still to this day that still don't have the answers they're rightfully entitled to.
You got a couple of them in here.
Yeah, I've noticed there was a few.
We got CL she was there at the event. So I believe Jeff is in here as well. I think I saw him earlier. Not Jeff Fudner, but a different Jeff. But yeah, there's a couple in here. So I kind of felt the same way. The evidence that I got was more important to me to answer the questions that were being asked early on for the people, because they weren't getting answers from law enforcement. They weren't getting answers from even the media. And the media inside Las Vegas was basically clearly by this day, and I've got evidence to support what I'm about to say, the media inside Las Vegas was basically being controlled as well. And that's why I guess they didn't like me too. There's Jeff. That Jeff's got there. He was there as well. He was over by the tanks. He's got a picture that was taken at 10:41, if memory serves, when he was standing right by the tanks, because a lot of people are bringing up saying that the tanks were shot at well afterwards or what have you. But his picture actually cured one of those conspiracy theories that was out there.
Okay. I just saw someone ask where Henderson is. It's on the southeastern side of Vegas. It's like a small suburb.
Yeah.
But it's a town within its own right. And there was another question I saw.
No, Tony's actually asking where in Henderson is Campos. And he is at one. I'll give you the first digit of his address. That's all you're going to get.
I saw another question as well, Mike, up on the list somewhere. Yes, Thumper. Was the Campos on L in the same Campos that's we see on body cam? Yes. There's a lot of theories. I did see a quite enlightened YouTube video a few months back where some guy was trying to morph Campos's face into some known ISIS fighter or something like that.
Yeah,
which I found hilarious. hilarious.
That probably was Thumper. Thumper's our resident conspiracy theorist. He can be cool at times, but he can also be kind of weird at times. But
no, it was the same person. It was one and the same. You got to understand that Campos looks a bit thinner 3 weeks prior in the body cam footage, because for the period after the shooting up until the time of the Ellen DeGeneres show, he was literally being wined and dined at some of the finest hotels in Vegas before he disappeared to Mexico, then came back. So he's I mean, I'm from the UK. When I go back there, I like to, eat my local foods and everything else, and I probably put on about 2 or 3 pounds. Mm-hmm. And so it's
the other issue with that is that I actually took a picture of Campos that was using a Sony professional, $800,000 camera, but you have a filter inside Photoshop where you can actually correct the images, which is actually how I found which camera was taking the pictures inside the the leaked images, as you well know. But if you do those filters, you can actually see that if you're on a TV set like at the Ellen DeGeneres show, that camera is going to show you in a much different angle a much different perspective than, say, a camera like your cell phone camera versus a professional DSLR. So if you take a picture all at the same distance of the same object, especially when it's a person, because we look at a person, we go, oh, well, they're thin, they're fat, they're this or that. It's just like the image on the right that you have on the screen here. That image is obviously elongated one direction, where the other image is elongated the different. So obviously 2 different cameras, and that's how you can tell. Sometimes is a wide angle view is going to make you look small and thin, and a close up shot is going to make you look kind of fat with a huge nose or something like that. So
and again, I mean, with Campos on the Ellen DeGeneres show, that's another experience in itself, because if you look at the rendering they used to show his Mickey Mouse heroics, shall we say?
I can pull that up. Go ahead.
The rendering's not even the same building. It's nowhere close. And they omit the room service cart, which is quite interesting, because it's not a part of the official narrative for Campos. It's, it was never there according to him.
Right.
And I don't think he really thought through his lies, or he didn't know that the hotel system logged every time the doors were locked and opened. Because if you read his transcript, he tries to imply that the shooter put the cart in the hallway after he walked past it, the area. Mm-hmm. Why he would do that, God only knows. But there are, which will be expanded upon in the book, there is a train of thought from a lot of people from that time who. Are you?
First of all,
I'll show you that.
There you go.
Let's take a look at that for a second.
Better each day, slowly but surely, just healing physically and mentally.
Yeah, I imagine that you relived that a lot.
Yeah, I think it's quite a way in, Mike. I think it's
let me fast forward.
Each day
passes, here.
There
it is, right. And here.
Place. Right. So what we're talking about here, just so everybody's clear. Okay. So this is.
So if you pause it just there, Mike, you'll notice that
this is.
There you go. The alcove.
Right here.
It's actually emitted from the whole thing's emitted. The walls are a different configuration.
They're close. It's just not that deep.
Yeah.
And also the way there's a railing that goes around this out here, but this would have been the door that was the L bracket was on.
Yeah.
I'm here. So.
And the phone would have just been the other side of the door to the. No, it was on the other side of the wall, Mike.
On this
there
side.
You go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was inside the foyer, but on the wall facing the hallway.
Yeah, I've got the 360 view of me going through that hallway, and so when we did that. Yeah, I wondered where that phone would ring to, so I actually picked it up just to see.
If you actually look at the way they've done the rendering, you will notice that the wall from the doorway of 32135 down to the doorway of 32134 is straight.
Right.
But that wall's actually stepped in.
Right.
So it gives a false perspective of what the floor is actually like.
Right.
So
yeah, it kind of does, and plus the way they took the image, this looks like it's elongated.
Yeah,
like this is a lot closer. This wall should be right here, coming across
Yeah.
and then go around. So yeah, I agree.
They've completely made it completely different just for the sake of campus, I believe, because they've omitted the room service cart, and good old Ellen, the world's best documentary filmmaker, doesn't even
Absolutely
bring attention to the fact that there was a highly sophisticated security system in the hallway. There was a security network which, even the police found it was quite impressive. Not to glorify what the shooter did, but it was quite impressive the way he planned this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where another theory comes out. They say the shooter was some sort of government agent trained or whatever. The fact is, he was just a bean counter for the IRS for a few years and received no formal training.
Right.
He just, unlike other mass shootings where people go and do it on the spur of the moment, he genuinely methodically planned this, same as the Columbine massacre back in '99. That's why that was so horrific as well, because the two 18, I think they were 18-year-old boys,
Mm-hmm.
Literally planned it for 12 months, virtually the same time as what the Vegas shooter planned it for.
Right.
So of course, it's if you plan something for 12 months, it's going to go, horribly. There's really no words to describe it, because the act he committed was horrific.
And it wasn't too difficult of a thing to do. A lot of people make it sound like the 64-year-old man did all of these different things, and the conspiracy was there's no way he could do these things. And quite honestly, yeah, he could. He could have even done worse, because keep in mind he had over 4,000 or 5,000 rounds in that room. He could have kept firing.
Yeah. And that brings us to another point. You had some former Las Vegas police officer being a I don't know what you would officially call him, but some sort of crime field expert saying, he had gone for what we call a stronghold. That room was no way a stronghold.
Right.
He could have kept the police at bay for the rates of fire, if he could have sustained them, maybe 25, 30 minutes.
Right. Yeah, he didn't have anything blocking the door. He didn't take the. There's a lot of furniture in that room. He could have barricaded himself in that room, and he didn't do that. There's also a question here about some tannerite. I know a lot of people were questioning whether or not he was going to bring tannerite into the room, whether or not he's going to put it by the tanks, or what's your take on the tannerite?
I think he had a plan for the tannerite, as we've discussed previously.
Right.
And he just never developed that section of the plan, either because the venue was constantly staffed. Even when people weren't there was still people milling about within the grounds, setting up and everything else. And if you stick a rucksack, I believe the rucksack he purchased from the Walmart a few days before was black. If he would have tried to sling that over the fence by the fuel tanks, it would have been noticed pretty quickly. The police did screen that area quite thoroughly every day. And I think he knew that. I mean, he was in a room adjacent to the venue, and he could, in one of the pictures of the crime scene pictures, you actually see his spotting scope.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was watching that venue during the day. That's evident. So he knew the security protocols, and he knew there would be no way he could have, planted any type of, let me just stop sharing my screen as well for a minute.
Okay.
There was no way he could have laid any sort of tannerite anywhere. And as you know, from when I was showing you my bullet drop calculations and everything else, I went one step further than everyone else and used a laser rangefinder to actually gauge what he was trying to hit.
Right.
And it's a source of conjecture, as we've always said, that the part he was looking to aim for, whether or not he was going to aim for it, no one really knows, but he was about 30 feet short of it.
Mm-hmm.
That could account for why he was hitting the front of the fuel tanks, not the back end.
Yeah. And plus, he was firing from a bed. I know you and I had some contention on how he was actually angled, but the way the bed was messed up, and people thought, well, who slept in that bed? In my opinion, it was he was laying across the bed, and part of the reason for him missing the shots on what he was actually shooting at, in my opinion, was because he was laying on a bed, and we practiced, obviously not laying on a bed on a hard surface, but when he laid on a bed, you have to control your breathing, hold your breath, what have you. And on a bed, when you shoot, the bed's going to move, you're going to move. and it's going to probably throw your shot off a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. But then also there's another aspect which no one's really looked at. The fuel tanks he was aiming at was Jet A fuel, which is, it can't be ignited unless it's under pressure.
Right.
However, Paddock's pilot training wasn't on Jet A fuel. His plane just run on aviation gasoline, which is highly flammable under any conditions. And I think he mistook the tanks for what they actually were. That's another theory that I've looked at, is did he genuinely believe those tanks were not jet? How close he got to them, no one will ever really know.
Right.
But I think he just thought it was normal aviation fuel, so it was easily combustible.
Well, when I initially talked about the tanks, in the very beginning, I thought that his first shots were at the tanks. I was mistaken, obviously, when I figured that out, when I listened to the audio. Once I figured out, I couldn't understand, because I stayed in room 32219, and I was able, it's about the same distance. I measured it's almost identical distance to the tanks. There's no way in hell he could have missed them. So I've realized, okay, he wasn't shooting at the tanks. And as people are saying, he was shooting at different things behind the tanks, like another plane or something like this. Yeah. And obviously that wasn't the case, because there's nothing like that behind it. But there was an object that he was shooting at, and I was contacted by someone at FAA and asked politely to not discuss the object that I was referring to back then, until they put some things in place. Over the next 6 months or so, they actually went around to different airports and put different things on. Like they put a metal, like a cage, over the top of these objects. So. Yeah,
as I say, I think he genuinely didn't believe it. I don't think he thought it was Jet A fuel, or he didn't understand what it was. I genuinely believe he was just aiming at the tanks, because normal aviation fuel is highly combustible, which he was used to dealing with his own private plane. Single prop engines use a different type of fuel to Jet A, and that's what I think he thought it was. And but yeah, the tannerite, back on track. I think he genuinely did plan to use it. He just couldn't plant the tannerite where he wanted it, because it would have drawn too much suspicion. The police, even though they didn't get there till a certain time in the afternoon, they still did a regular patrol throughout the morning, because again, with Homeland Security protocols and everything else, they would have to, I think the radius they had to go up to was like 1,000 meters out from the venue, or clear line of sight, and there was just no way for him to plant it, luckily enough. I mean, thankfully he didn't, even though it was an inert explosive and it would have just created a big bang, as a diversion away from, if he wanted to pull the people closer to him, which I think that's what he was aiming for, was, to hit the tannerite in one part of the ground so they all run towards him. Thankfully he didn't do that, because it would have been a hell of a lot worse than what we know it was now. So the tannerite is, I think it was a done deal within a few days, and I think he just kept it in his vehicle for whatever reason. But back to the room. So everyone has this theory that he was gonna, he took his own life for whatever reason. But from what I've looked at, from various bits and bobs and people I've spoke to, he had no intention of walking out that room or going for a stronghold assault. The blue funnel, I didn't actually get a picture of it. I didn't put it on there. Was actually due to the amount of gases that was going to be expelled from the weapon. That room would have got quite smoky and hard for him to breathe. So he designed a filtration system. And that's genuinely the way it's as simple as it is. Because what I found in this case, a lot of the people who claim to be experts have overthought the theories. And they've not looked at the most obvious points to think, well, hang on, this guy was shooting, his partner had confirmed that he was going out and firing hundreds of rounds every now and again. So he would be aware that the amount of gases expelled from the weapon would be quite intense with the rounds he intended to fire. So the room would be hard breathing at certain points. Again, and if you look at the desk within the master suite of 32135, the bedroom, there's a set of swimming scuba diver goggles on the desk. Again, because when it gets smoky, your eyesight gets affected because it gets in your eyes and makes them water. So he'd planned it to a point.
Smart.
Say again?
I thought we lost you there for a second.
No, I'm still here, mate.
All right, go ahead.
So yeah, he had planned it to a point that, you know, he was no dummy. He really wasn't, as we've said before, and I'm not gratifying him or glorifying him. I'm just being genuine that, you know, he was this is a guy that literally turned his life around from being poor and having nothing to being a millionaire within about 40 years of his, well, it wasn't even that, was it, Mike? It was, what, 20 odd years before he made his first million?
Yeah, it was about that. Correct.
Yeah. So, to make your first million, it's hard, and he did it, and it was, it's just, and the scariest thing is it's before all of the 1 October, he was just a normal person. That is what scared the experts, the LVMPD, the FBI, and everything else. And that's why another reason they haven't released so much data is because they don't want to repeat, because the way he planned it could be easily replicated. So they're very choice in what they release to stop copycats, because people do copy these sorts of things. And, no one really wants to see another Vegas.
Correct.
Because, then there's the motive and everything else. I mean, I think we've flogged that dead horse countless times.
Right, there's your scene there with the
there it is. What they label is the snorkel device. So you can quite clearly see that's a filtration system. That was not designed for a stronghold assault. That was just to keep him breathing whilst he was firing. Mm-hmm. So again, he meticulously planned this, which is sickening to think.
Yeah, he did. There was times when, in the early times when I was talking with Eric, one of the things I wanted to do was try to get in the mindset of Steve Paddock and to see essentially through his eyes, so to speak. But you have to kind of like get into their mind and find out. So the best way to do is to ask a bunch of questions, find out more about him. And I could see that what he was doing, like when he would switch to the single shots, and he had that spotting scope.
Yeah.
It was quite clear he was not shooting. The spotting scope was set up in such a way that he could see the carnage that he was creating.
Yeah.
And so that's a sick thought that someone would do that, but that's what we're dealing with. And
I just want to address Larry Ross's point about the 2 inhalers in his room. This device wouldn't have actually been effective against tear gas. It wasn't robust enough.
Right.
Simple gas released by in an explosion from a round or a bullet, as people like to call it. Mm-hmm. It was ideal. And actually, in drawing his autopsy, it was found he actually didn't have asthma, which was he was just a hypochondriac. He really was. We've had this chat as well, haven't we, Mike, where he used to wear these gloves on occasion.
Right.
Because he was some big germaphobe.
Yeah.
But then if you look at certain security footage of him in the casino and places like that, where hundreds of people touch the machines on a daily basis, he doesn't wear gloves.
True.
So it's just, I think some of it he would do it for attention. I really did. Mm-hmm. And people can disagree with me on that, but I think.
Well, Stable asked a question here. He says, "Explain why that gun smoke didn't trigger the fire alarm, but the door breach did it twice." And I can explain it, or you can explain it. I'll let you take this one.
Well, you can take it if you want, Mike, because I was just looking through another one. I was just trying to find it.
All right, here's your answer, Stable. The reason for that, the reason why the smoke didn't, from the shooting didn't do it, is because that's why he hit 2 windows out and not just one. Because if you go into a room and you break out one window, you're not really going to create a flow through. And actually, HVAC can back me up on this, because this is what he deals with all the time. But if you break out a second window in a different locations, whatever, it allows for the air to flow through the room and pull the smoke out. The reason why it didn't do that with the breaching of the room is because of the amount of the firepower. Keep in mind that the first breach, the fire alarm did not go off. The second one is pretty much when it did, and that's because it was such a large volume of smoke and what have you fast. It wasn't like several shots and time for it to clear out. There's a large volume really fast, and that's probably what did it.
So I'm just looking at Stable Foe. where he mentioned in the top of the tanks where the fumes would gather. Yes, but with the type of fuel that was contained within the tanks. There's actually a pretty good YouTube video, which I'll send you a link of, Mike, so you can post it.
Sure.
And you literally get some guy sticking matches in Jet A fuel. It's designed to...
You can put a torch to it and it won't go up.
It's genuinely designed to combust under pressure. Where the type of gas aviation fuel that the shooter was used to using in his single prop engine plane was highly flammable.
Right.
You know, people have this...
just so you know, Jet A fuel is so close to kerosene. You can almost run kerosene through a jet engine, and it will actually, you can run it through, and it will work. But the way it works is the fuel is atomized, much like I do when I smoke my vape. And once the fuel is atomized in the air, that's when the particles become small enough where they can actually ignite. You could sit there, put a torch to it. You can throw matches in it. It's just like diesel fuel. You can do the same thing with diesel fuel. It just won't work. But that's your reason there.
CL asked about thoughts about the vase. That's one which we've highly contested over, Mike and I. And I think we came to the same conclusion at one point, and just for the sake of it, because I think we were getting a bit heated one night. I think he was trying to use it as part of his security network outside the door. And then I think he suddenly realized that I believe they'd changed their method of operation, and prior to the 1 October, or prior to his stay before 1 October, they used to have a room service cart with vases on for his type of level of perks. But after a certain date in 2017, they'd actually changed the layout of the carts as they do regularly. So the vase become non-existent. So that's why I think he brought a vase. And, you know, he did a lot of things which no one can understand. Why did he stay at I can't remember the hotel just down the road. The Ogden. You know, people say it was that's where he was originally going to attack. No, that was never his plan to attack there. You know, as we've discussed, Mike, I think his trips back to Mesquite was just to leave his cell phone. The guy was no dummy. He knew that they would be tracing him. And I think in his own little mind, he genuinely believed he was being watched.
Right. And I think another aspect of it too is if you're going to do a mass shooting, or if you're going to do something to this magnitude, you kind of practice first. You get over the jitters or whatever situation. Now, he's a very smart man, so most likely if he had an issue that might make him nervous or what have you, or have some sort of tell, if you try it at the Ogden, then if you don't do anything, you just say, well, you know, if somebody asks why you're bringing your guns, you could do that just like I did when I was at the SHOT Show. I brought 60 or 70 guns into the hotel room, and I did so because I did not want to leave them in my vehicle. There's nowhere else to put them.
Yeah, no, I noticed there was someone asking why we think he finished shooting as early as he did. I believe it was a combination of two factors. One, he just genuinely just ran out of steam. And I think his body was in that much pain by then that he just gave up. And secondly, I think he, with the two people in the hallway, I think he genuinely believed they were police officers and they were closing in. And he was that much of an egotistical person that he decided to take his own life instead of someone else taking it for him. Right. Because that would be not within his modus operandi. I'm just having a look on here now, see if there's anything else we've missed, Mike, on the questions.
We've got one up here. I'm trying to go through them, but if you guys don't type in all caps, it actually makes it difficult because I can't tell if you're talking to somebody else or us. So a question for either of us, if you specifically want a question for me, then just put my name or Mark's name or whatever in front, and then just do it in all caps. It's so much easier to see. There's one about the hard drive. I think Stableflow or somebody did that.
Yeah, we've. I think this is another one we've flogged until it was dead. It was, Mike and my theory was that he discarded it somewhere between Vegas and Mesquite.
Yep.
And if you look at the terrain around there, it's quite a big area.
Yep.
If you're traveling down the road at 80 miles an hour and you throw something out of a window, it's going to go quite a long way off the road.
Yeah, no, in fact, I was actually going to drive that way and see if I got my my extrasensory perception things going on, so I could find out where that went. I talked to Eric about that as well. There was a question about the IRS thing. That was not. I don't want to speak directly for Eric. I'm trying to remember exactly how he worded it, But let's just say that the information on the hard drive it had really nothing to do about the taxes or whatever that was put up there. And you keep in mind, Eric was trying to keep the media from going over to all the other family members, especially his mom. So he kept entertaining them to keep their interest on him. That way, he could pretty much, help control what information is going on about the family, which was good. It was him because he was the most knowledgeable anyway. Because you sure as hell didn't want to hear, what Bruce had to say. So,
again, there's another point where people are saying he could have just walked down the strip and discarded any garbage bin. Yeah, he could have done. There's 1,000 places he could have discarded it, but the most logical explanation would be somewhere between Mesquite and Vegas, because what people don't realize is in the wake of 9/11, a lot of trash receptacles are actually searched several times a day.
Yep.
And even though you don't notice it, when people go in, remove trash from a bin, they do actually go back for sorting. They don't just go and discard them at landfill.
Right.
And so someone comes across a hard drive, it's going to be probably an unusual item to find on the Vegas Strip trash bins. So someone would have kept it or whatever. So I think he was going for the biggest possibility of just discarding it somewhere,
There's a lot of theories. Saint asks what could have been on the hard drives. There's the theories about what could be on there is all over the map.
Yeah.
There's a question as to whether or not the laptop that he pulled the hard drive from. Now, keep in mind if memory serves, he searched the internet on the 28th, I believe, the 28th to find out. Yeah, the 25th to find out how to remove a hard drive from that particular computer. Most people could just turn over a computer and look at the screws, whatever. But there's obviously some question as to how he would do that, because Eric was actually his electronics guy, because Eric would configure his computers, do everything for him. But what we don't know, and I can try to ask Eric about this, is which laptop, because he had two, I think, in there, which one was the one he used for more personal communication, stuff like that. And my thought is most likely it would have been something along the lines of that. He didn't want maybe there's other stuff on there, or he threw away the wrong hard drive because the other one obviously had the child porn on it, and that was not good.
I don't think that with the act he committed, I don't think child porn was the last thing he really cared about coming out. Right. I think you're right. I think in a certain element he tried to protect his family as much as he could, and there may have been something on that hard drive which, Eric, as you said, made a big song and dance about the IRS. Maybe there is some justification to that, and maybe there really was something on there which could have implicated the family's finances.
Right.
To say that they were not telling the tax man about everything.
Okay. CL asks on here, Mark, why different stories? How he died? Did he killed himself? They shot him. What have you? I remember this is quite an interesting point, and so he definitely did kill himself. I've sent the autopsy report to a independent pathologist, and he did confirm that the wounds were self-inflicted. So this was not an LVMPD. I think it's in there somewhere. There's a autopsy report. Yeah, I can pull this. I actually have it somewhere.
But it was a gunshot wound to the roof of the mouth, and the reason they believed LVMPD shot him initially was because when they breached the second door, they had inexperienced officers who were assaulting the room, who let off, I think it was a 3-round burst. So you've got people that claim that, that's how they killed him and everything else, but it wasn't. It was genuinely just what we call a negligent discharge. Because, a lot of people fault the LVMPD guys on the floor that night. The only ones I really do fault is Hendricks and what was the other guy's name on the 31st floor, Mike?
On the Varson? Varson.
Hendricks and Varson, because they could have really done something. The officers moving up the hallway were in what they call a fatal funnel, and they had to go cautiously. And the guys that actually went in, there was only one certified SWAT officer. The rest were not SWAT. So even though they go through yearly training to assault various positions, they don't do it on a daily basis.
Right.
So their nerves are jittery and everything else. And you've got to understand, from the amount of firepower, that was coming out of that room, people did genuinely believe there was 2 shooters in that room.
Right.
But there wasn't. There was certainly only one shooter. There wasn't two, and the officers were being cautious, and one just got scared. Basically, you just squeeze the trigger at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
Go on. No, go on, Mike.
Well, the other thing is, about. Well, I was looking at another question coming up here too. When you look at them breaching the room, and there's some questions about who's breaching the room, why the SWAT team wasn't there, ready, and stuff like this. Keep in mind that 1 month previous to this, the MGM had announced that they had their own internal SWAT team.
Yeah.
They bragged about it, in fact, and that kind of alluded to us, myself thinking that, well, possibly if an event like this would happen, that they would be the first on the scene. Also, LVMPD is one of the highest rated SWAT teams in the world, actually. Well, in the country for sure, but also in the world. And where were they that they were not ready? That was an area in contention that was very early on, is why did it take an hour and 17 minutes to breach that room? And all these other questions that came into mind. There's a lot of answers to that we could have a whole show just on that. But
there's a simple answer to that, Mike. As you know, it's called a tactical approach. And when it comes to active shooters, the only time officers do not have to obtain permission to assault a room, whether they be SWAT or normal everyday patrol officers, is when the danger is at its foremost, which is, i.e., when he's firing. As he was not firing by the time the officers got up on the floor, it was reason that they would have to gain permission. That's what it comes down to: tactical ability, tactical tactics. And there was no imminent danger after he killed himself, so they didn't know he was dead, obviously. So they just took it cautiously. Had he opened fire a second time, they would have. It was quite plainly stated they would have assaulted that room a lot quicker. It was just there was no danger after 10:16 p.m. And the officers didn't get up on the floor until I think the first two got up actually on the floor was at 10:17 p.m. So a full minute after the shooter had killed himself.
All right, I'm going to bring up the questions. I keep forgetting I have this feature where I can actually put the question on the screen. So when I see a question, I'll pop it up there. This might get into more of a medical issue that we may not be able to answer properly.
I'm quite not sure. I know what hemorrhaging is, but that first, petechia. Okay, you got to understand that the guy shot himself in the mouth, and the roof of the mouth. So it's like this. You can actually get you can burst a blood vessel from sneezing. I know that because I've burst mine from actually sneezing. But there, if you can actually see it on the camera, and when you've got a projectile going through a brain, for want of a better word, it would expand. In fact, his didn't because it wasn't a long enough flight path. But it causes all sorts of internal injuries. It's just the sheer force. And there is suspicion that he may have been alive for a few seconds after he killed himself or administered the kill shot, which is feasible. So he would have still been breathing, so he would have coughed up blood and everything else. Do you figure a female?
Yeah, this. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just looking at the question to see what else. Petechia, hemorrhaging. That's why he had it. In fact, the hemorrhaging around the eyes was actually from his mouth from when they took the body over. I don't know if you've got the fit report that actually shows the body, Mike.
Yeah, I do. I've actually got those images, but that hard drive is foobar at the moment. Let me get this.
I think it's page 95.
95. Yeah, I'm scrolling right here. There we go.
No, keep going up.
Up.
Around there somewhere.
Let me go up on this side. Right, this gets into the room. And it's going to be...
There. I think it's the next page up.
This one right there.
Yeah, so if you look at the way the body is right there, that's after the body was moved. Right. That is a crime scene photo. Mike did, I think it was Mike who actually did a very good video on LVMPD sharing the initial, what they call suspect photo.
Right.
And if you look on the body cam Mike was zooming in on, that was on someone's phone, you will actually see the first picture LVMPD ever took of the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you compare it to that one, you'll see there was a, when they basically moved the body, the blood came out of the mouth.
Right. That was Matchco that did that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, people like Matchco, I've got a lot of time for. He's a high-grade officer. And he did what he had to do that night. And he did everything the way he should have done it.
Agreed. All right, let's see. Fonz.
Movement after 10:18 due to the thermostat as stated in one of the fits. Yeah, okay. So these thermostats in hotel rooms are not very accurate. They actually, I believe that is actually a different system. They couldn't access that until after entering the room, I believe.
Right.
I'm not certain.
Yeah, this one I actually know directly. The thermostat that's in that room is made specifically to have a sensor inside it that is basically to tell if someone's been in the room or not. Yeah. So if you leave the room and a timer is set, in Mandalay Bay's instance, it's 15 minutes. 15 minutes after you leave the room, it'll notice you're not there, and it changes the temperature in the room. It gets slightly warmer or cooler depending on the time of year, but it's done that way to save hundreds of thousands of dollars on electric bills. But the other end of the spectrum too is it can tell if someone has moved or not. Now, Steve Paddock died at 10:16 and 16 seconds. That's the moment that the final shot was fired. That's when he died. So the 10:18 no movement after 10:18 is accurate. He did not move after 10:16. He wasn't moving. So when they came up with that on the report, because there's a separate report you can generate off of that system, and it does show movement. It shows it's not that this has nothing to do with the doors, but it does have to do with movement in the room. It's more of a heat sensor. It's just like a motion sensor is basically it is, but motion sensors work on infrared or heat movement, and that's how that works. So.
Okay, sorry to cut in, Mike. I am to bear. That's the spyglass. I believe you're referring to the spotting scope as a more technical term for it in the background. Yeah, there you go. That's the one, Mike.
Yeah, that's the that's
the spotting scope.
That was moved, by the way.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm just looking now. Some believe that is not Paddock. Cial. Please define, as in it's not Paddock in that room, or it wasn't Paddock that fired.
Yeah, that gets into that whole realm of area that we hate talking about. The people that come up with these alternative ways that this occurred do not come up with alternative evidence that supports their theory.
Yeah, so Cial's clarified it's in the room. Mm-hmm. Paddock was the only shooter. The reason I say that conclusively, for two reasons. Firstly, if you go through the trove of evidence that was released under court order, you will find there is a witness statement in there which alludes to how people thought there was an active shooter in other parts of the building. Primarily because a lot of hotel guests had heard the shooting and tried to phone the Mandalay Bay reception or security off the internal room phones, and it overloaded the switchboard, which is another point because Campos claimed to use his cell phone that night and phoned the same number, but no one else could get through. And from, I think it was like 10:05 or just a little after he started firing with a bump stock, people were phoning the hotel security desk, and one person phoned the Luxor by mistake, and the Luxor then believed they had an active shooter as well, because it was the message was that, I'm 2 floors below the shooter and I can hear him. They didn't realize it was coming from the Mandalay Bay. And yes, there was a lot of firepower in that room. The shooter had specifically trained. That's how far he had taken this. He'd trained on these weapon systems. And, I've been in situations when I was in the military on exercise and things like that, where I had fooled people to think I actually had what they call a general purpose machine gun. It was just quick mag changes, right, and bombing my magazines were quick enough to make people think I was firing in 3-round bursts and everything else.
Yeah. Now, you bump fire. The term bump fire doesn't necessarily mean that stock device that they had on there. But no. Bump fire just by holding the weapon properly and allowing the motion of the weapon to move back and forth inside the trigger area, and then your finger just stay in that one direction, and it pulls the trigger each time it comes back.
And it's, he was the only shooter. That hotel and that area was widely picked over, and there was never any evidence to prove a second shooter. I've spoken to various sources, and they've all confirmed that there was only one shooter. And I'm pretty certain someone would have broke the story by now if there was a second shooter.
Right.
Bout loop. Alan.
Yeah. What you meant by belt loop is when you do the bump fire, you hold it onto your belt loop, which is one of the ways to do it. We used to do it with those little. It's like a bread tie, but it's a long ties you use, like zip ties, and we would hold it back through our vest.
Okay. Yeah. Normally, I just use a change lever on my weapon and just change it full automatic, but he didn't have that. Let's have a look. What else is there? The ears. Fawn spy. What's you going on about the ears?
Well, what she's probably referring to on the ears is the question was brought up earlier as to whether or not he had detached earlobes or not. Essentially, that conspiracy was to show that it was not Paddock that was laying in that room, which was pretty much dispelled. Eric even, I mean, when Eric says that's his brother, that's his brother.
There's a lot of changes that take part of after death. There's a lot of changes the body goes through, and that's what people have got to understand, that if you've ever seen a dead relative or anything like that, they look completely different in death than they do in life. And again, different angles of two different photographs and everything else. Yeah, it's all down to the way you perceive it. But that was Paddock, and he was the only shooter in Vegas.
Absolutely. And we are paid disinfo agents. And Mark, did you get your check yet?
No, not yet.
Me either.
I'm still waiting for Sheriff Lombardo to send it to me.
Yeah. Is there anything about Sheriff Lombardo that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's loads of things about him. But if I'm going to share my screen again, in fact, Mike, go to page 101, please, of the report.
All right, I'm there.
Okay, so this is where me and Mike had a bit of a chuckle.
This one right here.
When I went through the FIT report, I found about 3,000 different inaccuracies, which was quite funny. And this is one that is highly amusing in a sense. As sick as this report is, it's highly amusing in the sense that you have a plain photograph which states there was no magazine on the weapon, but the photograph says something different. You can see. Right. No magazine.
Magazine. There seems to be a magazine there.
Yeah, that's a 100-round magazine, definitely.
It's a hell of a banana.
Yeah, it's the report is very haphazard, and I think the train of thought for LVMPD was the quicker they put it to bed, the quicker Vegas gets back to normal. There was no conspiracy in the sense there was no two shooters. There was no links to international terrorists. And CL, I'll come on to your question in a second. He was just a deranged person at the end that, for whatever reason, decided to unleash a torrent of horrific, murderous rage on innocent people for no apparent reason. Okay, I'll do this one. Yeah, I'll do this one, then I'll go on to Cial's about the inconsistencies. You got to be very careful when it comes to Mary Lou Danley, because on a burden of proof, there isn't any, even though she voluntarily admitted her fingerprints would be on some of the rounds that would be found in the room in the magazines. Yes, she did accompany him to the range. How complicit she was, I don't know. I'm not even going to give a guess on that one, because she is backed by a very good team of attorneys who would make mincemeat of anyone. And as it shows, she walked out of FBI custody. Well, she voluntarily turned herself in. We will never know that one. It's as simple as that. And if she was complicit, then there was never any evidence to suggest that other than fingerprints. Okay, why so many inconsistencies in the FIT report? Honestly, this is my own theory, and I think it's because LVMPD really didn't care once anything was found that it was not a terrorist. I think they just wanted it put to bed as quick as possible. And, it was a shock. And I've spoke to various sources within the LVMPD who didn't even agree with the FIT report. They didn't even want to put their name to it. That's why there's only 3 names on there, one of them being the sheriffs. It caused a lot of discontent amongst the ranks from what I can gather. And, it needs to be rewritten, to be quite honest. Mike's highlighting the,
okay. So something that I came up with. I mean, I even contacted the LVMPD and told them about the 2 shots which is the bus stop video. And those are the .308 rounds, the last 2 rounds before he fired his suicide shot. So even right here, it says the investigation was unable to determine when the 7th and 8th rounds were fired at the fuel tank, when it was easy to figure that one out.
Yeah. I just saw another question on here. Hang on a second, Mike. It was about an experimental vehicle in the car park of the Luxor. Yeah, I believe it was owned by Tesla, actually. Tesla were doing some testing around there, and some gizmos were seen hanging off. And obviously, with everything that was going on, people got a bit jumpy. And someone answered that. Was Chicago a dry run for Vegas? In my opinion, no. Chicago wasn't a dry run. I believe wholeheartedly that he had singled out the Route 91 festival because he had no other axe to grind, so to speak, than with MGM. Eric, I think, gave an interview to Mike where he stated MGM was screwing him. Mm-hmm. The shooter was being screwed by MGM. And when I read through various statements from various workers within the hotels who came in direct contact with Paddock and spoke to them on a research level, he was, in a sense, being screwed. They were changing out machines on him. They were changing his perks to better them. And I think his motive for all this was genuinely he wanted to hurt the MGM as much as possible. And unfortunately, the Route 91 festival was the only way he could feasibly see he could virtually nearly bring the company to its knees. And it was very close to going bankrupt in the wake of 1 October. The share price plummeted overnight. It's, and that's another reason that Campos was kept away from everyone, was because of the liability angle, I believe. If he would have been allowed to speak in public, I think there would have been a lot of questions asked, which any decent or half-decent attorney could have pulled MGM to bits, and the recent settlement would have been a fraction of the price they would have actually had to pay. So that's, again, I expand upon that theory in the book. I think we missed a couple of questions here, Mike.
We're gonna let's take a break for a second to get something to drink. I'm gonna put up a clip on Money Machine real quick, and I'm gonna grab something to drink before I lose my ability to speak. So we'll put that up here.
Okay.
Give me just a minute here. I'll share this screen and we'll hit play. I'll be right back.
We're talking about the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States.
This is a crazed lunatic.
My brother just killed 58 people. My dad was on the 10 most wanted FBI list. We're not normal people. Steve gambled $1.6 million at the Mandalay in the week before he did this. He was really, really angry with the gaming industry.
There's been accusations that there's multiple shooters. That has been proven to be false.
You had politicians grandstanding on this Vegas Strong movement to get elected.
Vegas Strong.
I'm turning tragedy into opportunity.
It was an election year, and it was camera time for Lombardo and his friends.
I want to thank Sheriff Lombardo for your leadership.
I'm getting FaceTime every day.
Almost every press conference, you saw one figure, and that was Steve Sisolak, using this as a springboard for his political campaign.
Here's the tragedy to get elected.
While the hashtag Vegas Strong campaign raised over $10 million, less than $20,000 were distributed to the victims in the first 5 months.
We want those records released.
If they came out and said what really happened, I think they're afraid of a period of time where people say it's not safe to go to Vegas.
Nothing happens in Las Vegas without the ring of a cash register.
MGM Resorts is suing the victims.
They are being sued for getting shot.
Shameful, disgusting, outrageous.
The newly released video shows Las Vegas police waiting in the hallway as Stephen Paddock continues to murder people. Lives could have been saved if they would have taken action.
They were fibbing the whole time about being such big heroes. They're hiding in the hallway.
I asked them, are you stupid or are you incompetent?
Please stop asking your questions.
You hear officers directly saying, turn your cameras off.
I'm telling you right now, there's more than one shooter. Could be as many as 3. We saw multiple muzzle flashes coming out that window.
There is no conspiracy.
Trust it! Yeah, can't trust it!
All right, so we're back there.
Okay, so
which question were you looking at there?
I was just looking at a few of them. There was a one about a suspected bomb that apparently went off on that evening. There was no explosive devices detonated that night. That's a misrepresentation.
Yeah, one of them was actually a guy's suitcase falling. I was able to verify some of that, and then the other contention, which actually brings up some mixed emotions on this one, was whether or not there was a shooting at Bellagio. I was actually going to do a show with the person who made the claim, but I was not told before the show who the person was or what I was going to be asked and stuff like this. So I actually denied doing the show once I figured out what it was, because it was a survivor, or not a survivor, but it was somebody that was, believed that they heard shots fired at Bellagio. And I knew, and her husband was a 23-year veteran Marine and what have you. And so I decided to not do that show because I kind of knew what the sound probably was. But also there's video at the time from body-worn camera footage of the police officers in the parking or in the entry area where she was walking through there, and there was obviously no shots fired there. But it was kind of a rough time back then, trying to answer all these questions and not step on someone's shoes.
Yeah, and I think you actually addressed this. I think it was in Money Machine.
Yeah.
At the end, where you've got that side profile in the hotel with your little funky hat on. You had a mass casualty event. You had casualties running all over the place, and the news had pretty much went down the strip pretty quickly that there was a mass shooting, and then you've got people running in covered in blood, and people just got scared, for want of a better word. And then you had police officers that didn't help, who had been at home, had heard about the incident unfolding, so they literally just grabbed their body armor or plate carriers or whatever in plain clothes, grabbed their rifles and went to the scene.
Right.
Half of them didn't even have identifying marks on them, so they didn't know they were police officers. So you had police officers who were off duty turning up to the scene, trying to help out as best they could, who was storming hotels and God knows whatever else, being mistaken. And it was, you read the logs, it's just, it was akin to a battlefield. It really was. The confusion, the misrepresentation of facts from police officers because they really didn't know what was going on. You've got a group of officers that were pinned down by the shooter for a few seconds. One of them was shot, got hit by a ricochet. And by that morning, I believe that officer was, it was believed in the media that there was 2 police officers killed, but actually there wasn't. He had just been a minor wound.
Yeah. Well, the one that was killed was Hatfield. That was.
Yeah. Hatfield was the only one that was killed, but there was another officer that was shot in the shoulder. He was around by the area of what they call Gate 2. I'll see if I've got a picture of that actually. Mike, could you pull up the report again of the FIT report, and I'll show you where the second officer, one of the officers was shot in the shoulder.
Turn the audio off for it. Well, I can leave it on. I guess. Okay.
So if you go to the overall view of the scene,
the aerial view.
Yeah, the aerial view of the scene.
Okay, let me get that. It's right. That's that one. I think it's actually earlier before.
Yeah, it is earlier in the report. It's
it's like one of the first pictures.
Yeah, it's.
Right.
There you go. No, down a bit, Mike. Next one down. There you go. So where you've got, that's the back end of the venue. Where you've got Giles Street that loops around onto Mandalay Bay Road, the junction or the intersection where Mandalay Bay Road intersects with Las Vegas Boulevard, an officer was actually shot on the closest to the Giles Road exit. So
this is gate 6. This is
gate 6
5 right here. That's gate 6.
So if you carry on around the other side, Mike, towards gate 2, which is on the west side of the complex.
Okay.
Gate 2 is the one at the very end.
It's right here, back right.
No, gate 2 down the other end. It's south of the. It's where Mandalay Bay and Las Vegas Boulevard intersect. Is gate 2. Yeah, so the officer was virtually in that area where he was when he was shot in the shoulder.
Right.
Again, I mean that was I think I read the fire chief's report that was suppressed and never put into the public domain, and then it was finally leaked a few years back. That stated the whole crime scene covered something like a 4-mile square radius. So that's another reason there was gaps within the investigation, because it was just a massive scene to process. Mike's now going to go on to.
Yeah, I've got all that down here. You guys are probably going to see something from another. Yeah, you see Tiger King there. Okay, so yeah, the secret's out. Let me get back up here. Sat. I'm going to pull this off here for a second so you don't see what I'm doing with Tiger King at the moment until I pull it back here. Hang on. About screwed up. Let's see here. Mandalay Bay. Go ahead, marketing.
Jeff Scott says he ran out of gate 6, which I believe that's on the eastern side.
I'm going to fly into it now. So here we go. I'm going to pull this back over here now. Okay, so this is. It's going to fly into Mandalay Bay.
Let me just put up my photos, because I did take a picture last time I was in Vegas of the actual gate for a specific reason, which will be in the book.
Mm-hmm. So this here is gate 1. Is this one here? Or I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And this is gate 2 right here.
So between. Let me double check what the number of the gate is, Mike. There's a reason why it was picked, because my research drew something to my attention to that area. Add a picture. Is that the?
Bring up the other.
No. I'm just trying to find the photograph of the gates. Someone actually did do one of the witnesses did do a very good witness statement where they actually included the plan of the park, and I can't seem to remember where that is.
Plan of the future of the park?
Of the arena itself. They actually put in their witness statement an aerial view of the park, of the arena, and labeled which gate they went out of, and it had all the gates on there. It was one of the actual maps from the Route 91 festival. So I just pulled up a newspaper article, which I just need to check something quickly.
And I'll let you share as well.
I just need to double check.
Do you have a suite on the ends of Mandalay Bay? Gate 6. They ever machine gun sound later tonight. Okay, the machine gun. I'll answer this one real quick. The machine gun sound that you hear on the audio portion of a body-worn camera, that is actually a modulated frequency sound that comes from someone keying their microphone. So when you key the mic and your microphone is not, and you're not talking through it, or you hold it up to something, that's that sound you hear. The reason why I know for a fact it's not gunfire is simply because it's an electronic modulated sound. When you bring it into an audio analyzer, it actually is plain as day, because you can actually see the waveform, and no gunfire would ever make that waveform. In fact, you can actually do this. You can get a program called Audacity. It's free. I use a different program, but Audacity is free, but it'll do the same thing. Whereas you pull up the file, you bring the audio into it, and you can see the waveforms that it generates. In fact, I might do it here before the end of the show. And those waveforms, if they're modulated, they're very clear and distinct, and they're equal between the two. Gunfire is not going to or weapon fire is not going to come out that way.
I'm looking at this comment from why didn't they use the SWAT team they had propped up? I don't quite understand that question.
Has anyone from LVMPD, why didn't they use the SWAT team they had propped up the month before? I think I think what you're referring to is the SWAT team, the internal SWAT team to MGM. That's what MGM had bragged about, was that the hotels would have their own internal SWAT. And that's a good question. I actually sent that question to MGM and never received an answer back from them. Basically, it'd be embarrassing for them to answer anyway, because they had just bragged about it literally a month before the shooting that they had this, and it was nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, also MGM actually never had a SWAT team at the time, I believe, from some of the research I've done. It was just one of these gimmicks that the hotels were trying to endorse, and it genuinely wasn't what we'd deem a SWAT team. It was just armed security officers who really had no training whatsoever.
4-round bursts.
So
you brought up a good point about that modulated sound. Because it was 4 sounds at a time, there's no weapon I know of, and I think you can agree, there's nothing in the British military, nothing in the American arsenal, or any arsenal in the world that has a 4-round burst.
No. 3-round burst, but not a 4.
Not a 4. I've seen 5. I have seen a 5-rounder, but never a 4.
I'm looking at okay, the 32nd floor you can't actually access anymore. There's a special way to access it. Even if you got in the service elevators, you couldn't get up to the 32nd floor anymore. It's completely closed off, and there's only very few people who can actually get access to it. It's a really weird way you have to get there.
So the area that I went through some 50 some odd times, you can't go up that same spot?
No.
Okay.
No, the security has improved in some respects. When I was there, actually, COVID was still going on, as you know, Mike. I mean, COVID was... So that pretty much gave me a free run of the hotel, so to speak. And it's not...
Talk about what you were able to do while you were there? Or we keep that?
I'm going to leave that for the book.
Okay.
Again, that's one of those ones where...
Sure, I understand.
Okay, in respect to this, the Saint, I was infantry, started off, so I do have extreme knowledge of weapons, and I've also cross-trained in various specialities. And so someone asked me a question many weeks ago about this shooter must have had some type of training because of the number of casualties he inflicted. The honest answer is he was firing from an elevated position down into a crowd of people, and he really didn't need any specialist training for that. As horrible as it is, it is horrible to say, but it's like shooting fish in a barrel. And that's another reason he didn't pick the Life is Beautiful event, was because it wasn't closed in. Where, Mike, if you spin the round to face the venue, looking away as if you're looking down from the Mandalay Bay.
That took off like crazy. Hang on.
There you go. Right. So where you've got the fenced around area, again, as you know, I think Jeff mentioned he was there that night, and he went out at gate 6, which would be on the eastern side, I think. Yeah.
That's gate 6. This is 7 right here. That's 6 right here.
Yeah.
I think Jeff went out this way and then ended up back over here right by the tanks, if I'm not mistaken, unless he went straight across.
Yeah, to say it was he picked that purely and simply because it offered the best casualty rate in his mind, and also it was directly affecting MGM because he had a grievance with MGM. Unfortunately, people didn't know the full extent of what was actually done to him, and he just snapped. So
yeah, he was, he got tired. They changed their game. Basically, the rules of the way Vegas is supposed to work is you go there, you spend money. If whether you win or lose doesn't make any difference. The amount of money you put through those machines is basically comped to you as a certain percentage. Just like on your credit card. If you spend $100,000 on your credit card, you get 2% back or whatever. So that's $2,000. So whatever it is, whatever their formula that they use, if you go to a hotel, you spend a lot of money or put money through their system, you get a certain, or you expect to get something back in return. So they comp you for food, they comp you for rooms, they comp you for whatever, just depending on how much money you put through their machines. And they changed the comps on him, so that basically changed, what he was expecting to receive as a benefit from doing that.
So I'm just going to address some comments here quickly about the Mandalay Bay itself. The Mandalay Bay is currently open between Monday. I think it's open Thursday to Sundays, and the staff numbers are right down, but the 32nd floor itself will never be reopened. That has been a decision, and I believe they're turning it into storerooms.
Well, you mean the 100 wing of the 32nd floor?
No, the whole floor apparently is going to be storage area.
Oh, really? Okay, because I stayed on the 32nd floor, but they're gonna close down the entire floor.
Apparently so, yeah, because people keep trying to get access to the 100 wing.
No.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's crazy. So CL, I don't quite know what she.
Let's see which one.
If you go up, wow, never thought of that. Two up, Mike, from where you are now. 2 up, yeah, there you go. Yeah, so no one. I don't think anyone's ever looked at that angle. It was a closed-in venue. I think that's what you're referring to. He methodically picked this because it was the most devastating thing he could do, and he couldn't cheat the machines because I wouldn't say he was cheating the machines. But if you look at the way the venue was picked by the shooter, it really is hard to say, but it really was a security nightmare to get out of, and that's why he picked it.
Agreed. Turn it up there. Pull this over.
I thought he didn't pick it.
Well, he kind of did, kind of didn't. When he originally got the room, the computer picked a lower room. He asked for something higher because he originally wanted to be in the 200 wing, and he ended up in the 100 ring, which, well, I guess when you look at it, the distance and the angle to where the venue is about the same, except obviously completely different perspectives from the viewing. You have the stage would actually be more in the way, in my opinion, in the 200 wing than it would.
Let me just see if I've got the picture from my room, Mike, because I was in the 200 wing.
Yeah, I was too. I can pull it up as well. Back here, 200 wing.
So, Mike, I'm going to share my screen a second.
Yep, let me pull it up here. Let me stop that one, and we'll pull yours up. Let me know when you're ready.
So this is the view from my room. That one.
Okay. There you go.
So there you go. That's the 200 wing. So the stage would have been roughly about here. So it would have been obscured unless he was higher up. So.
Yeah, and I'll try to pull it from 32219. I actually had video from that room, but some video I can't show yet. Let's see here. Go ahead and talk on your. Oh, did I pull your screen? Oh, you pulled the screen.
No, I just closed it out because I was going to go through another picture, but I can't.
You don't want to scroll. Yeah, you don't want to scroll through your pictures.
Yeah,
I got you. Yeah, let me know when you're ready. I'll pull it back up for you.
I mean, this is the actual view from the room. Let me check. As so I've pulled that one up, Mike.
All right, there you go.
So this was taken from the FIT report. Let me zoom in a little bit. So that was the review from 32135, and you can see the field of fire that this view afforded him was unbelievable. So that's why there were so many casualties, was because he was purely by an act of stupidity on the hotel's part, he was at the right angle. That's as simple as it is.
Yep.
So.
Laura, I got pictures of Laura Loomer carrying my bags. If you guys want to see that, just scroll across that.
I'll just see if there's any more questions we missed.
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll through that. I'm going to scroll through this and try to get another angle as well. Show that. All right, this is from my room. Let's
see. You can't stop, Tony. I'm just reading. You actually can't stop on any other floor other than your own now, because they've got a new security system where you have to scan your card to your room, and if you try and stop on any other floor, it won't let you.
Okay, that's 32219, and just to show you that that I'm on the same level as Patty, so you can count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's the same angle there. Let me scroll back one pick, or 2 pixels further back in the room, so you can see. It's got a fairly decent angle at this height, this altitude, because it's the same 32nd floor. But you would have to shift over to the other end of the building, and you would have the top of the stage light covering the crowd there.
Even in LVSA. So I've not replied to your email, guys. I've been very busy the last few months, as Micah could attest to. So I'll get around to that tomorrow sometime.
This is inside the room.
Mike, is Michelle Ramirez LVSA?
No. LVSA is LVSA. Michelle Tuscany is a friend.
That's the one. I couldn't remember her surname. I couldn't remember her name.
Michelle Ramirez. Well, that may be her. No, she's talking CL crazy. Get my number from Turber. That sounds like Tuscany right there. Sorry if I.
Yeah, so I had a phone call from Michelle from LVSA and missed the call. I've been meaning to return it.
Yeah. Yeah, she likes calling me at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Tony, simple answer is if you've got about $1 million in the bank, they may comp you, but you're not going to get in the rooms above or below unless you're a high roller, because they're very expensive. I think they're about but at the moment I think they're doing deals on those. Because there was talk of one time, I did hear this from they were going to turn it into some sort of museum, the 100 wing, but that was quickly put to bed. Mark, details on your book. The first one, I don't know which order they're going to come out in now. Yeah, we'll talk about that one in a second, Mike. Keep that one up there.
Sure.
This is in response to The Saint. The first one was meant to be Evolution of Mass Shootings in the US, and 1 October was going to be a follow-on, but I think it's going to be the other way around, because there's just so much material I've got for 1 October. It's unbelievable, and I'm slowly getting authorization to use lots of it. So there was another one I saw.
Another image or another question?
Oh no, so the image, Mike.
Okay.
So your interpretation of this was a bullet strike from 1 October, correct?
Yeah, and the reason this one was, and we did a test. I had Safari Land's test kit with me, and we did that. I had someone else with me as well that we went over this particular one. There was 2 more marks on the door that ended up not being that. But the amount of energy, the problem I had with it was the amount of energy after a ricochet, because it's an upsweep from the ground. So I had to hit something and go up. And I looked around to try to find, and I did an angle, looked back, and here I can show you the angle back from it. That's roughly where it was. And I looked all around in here. This is the mark I found with Laura when we were doing the laser thing, and could not find that mark. Also look for the bullet itself,
yeah, I've got issues with that strike on the door, because I've walked that scene enough times. I've looked at that angle, and I'm just not convinced that is a bullet strike. I think something hit it, whether it was a vehicle with
it's about about 4 feet up on the door.
It just
and
it just doesn't look anything like a bullet strike that I've ever seen, even a ricochet. For starters, the path of what you presume to be the strike is way too wide for a 5.56 or even a 303.
You're talking about between the flake off, don't count that into
no. So the path, yeah, the actual trajectory, it just doesn't resonate as a bullet strike to me. I've seen lots and lots and lots,
right,
at different angles, and that certainly doesn't correspond to anything I've ever seen. And that's what the FBI did, or the LVSA did, LVMPD. Sorry, LVSA. I didn't mean to insult you there. People did look at that quite intently, and it was disproven, I think, by I actually think it was Buddin forensics senior crimes officer.
I hope so.
Well, it was not anything to do with
we did on it. When I pulled the residue that was off of there, it came back as positive. But Sean, the guy that owns the place, he didn't see the mark from before, and I actually had the video of when I met Sean and when I always saw it. So I never in the very beginning I didn't 100% believe this was. I still don't 100%. So it very well could be something else. But at the time, and also after doing the testing, is the best conclusion I could come up with.
Yeah, Michelle Ramirez, Mike, is Michelle from LVSA.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I went there because Mike had told me about the memorial there to
Ramirez. Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously it was covered up by the time I got there.
The memorial is?
No. I meant the
mark.
What you perceive to be the mark.
Right. Yeah, it's useless now.
In respect to Thumper and the Saint, I did have a phone call from Michelle from LVSA, which I need to return, and also I had an email from Stephen over at LVSA. So, and Tony, simply your card reader won't work. It will breach the security protocols and throw you out.
Yep.
They've actually really improved their security on the access point. I will admit that.
Well, the cards are twofold. They've got some of the older cards with the room locks had a dual system. One, it had an RFID inside the card, and it had the magnetic strip. It had to have both to key the room. You couldn't, in other words, you couldn't just stand by somebody with an RFID reader and read that signal and open the door. And you also couldn't take someone's card and swipe it on a card reader and get the magnetic strip to copy over. You had to have two, both. And I've actually got the keys in my wallet. I think keys of the
You stole the keys, Mike?
Hell yeah, I did. The original keys.
That's disgraceful.
I mean, I have it in this wallet. No, not in this one. But
one thing that I do want to share with everyone tonight, which is an internal publication. This was never actually released in the public domain, but I do have a copy of it.
It's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I don't see why they didn't release it in the public domain. This was done specifically for LVMPD officers.
All right, folks, you're going to see something that's not normally seen by public eyes. This is. I'm
not going to show them the internal pages, but
all right, just the cover.
Yeah.
You're not going to show all the award ceremonies and stuff.
No. So if you want to put that screen on, Mike.
All right, let me go here.
Yeah, that's not mine. There you go. So this was done specifically for LVMPD. I'll just move up so you can see. I was given a copy of this by someone who I know, and there was only very few made, and they're not actually in publication anymore, but it's a quite interesting publication to read. There will be some highlights from it in my book because of what it contains, but I personally reckon that should have actually been released because it is quite touching when you read it. So let me just, there you go.
Okay.
So yeah, that's that. I don't know if I showed it you all, Mike. I think I showed you a few pages.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, we won't discuss what was in the pages, but yes.
I'm just seeing if there's any other photographs I can share.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to some that have not been revealed yet either.
So the trouble is, the sources that I use, I don't want to betray them. So
agree. Same here. I might betray this guy. Let me share that one here. Stop screen and share screen.
So this is quite an interesting. Once you do yours, Mike, I'm going to do this one about the room service bill for the shooter's room.
Okay.
Oh yeah. You all know that pace.
Don't know her. Don't know her either.
So I've done So I'm just going to share this screen. That one.
Okay.
Share audio. Okay, got it. Okay, so a lot of attention has been drawn to the fact that 2 people were in the room because of this little thing right here.
Know all about this one. Yep.
Okay. I'm also going to rubbish your intelligence, Mike, because this was widely looked into by various agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he wasn't even heard speaking to anyone else or attempting or making it believe he was speaking to anyone else.
Okay.
When he was just genuinely asked on the phone, how many people is it for? He just said 2.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we were told. As you can see, Tony is the one that took the meal to the room. And in talking to him, now Laura Loomer is the person who talked to Tony. I talked to him after the fact, but I didn't really get back into everything he said to Laura.
No, I ran a test, and it is true. You just basically tell the number of people in the room. Bear in mind, when I checked in, I was a single occupant.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ordered room service, they were like, "How many people is it for?" I'd said 1. I should have said 2.
Let me explain why he ordered for 2 as my theory, not necessarily theory. I think it's a pretty good educated guess. Here's the reason. And this is also brought up by Marty in Australia. We both had the same idea. If you needed a cart to come to your room, so you had planned out that you were going to put stuff on the cart and what have you so you can monitor the hallway, the way you would do it is say that you needed food for 2. If you only ordered a sandwich for yourself, they would just bring it to you on a plate. So the reason for the cart, my best guess would be he needed to get a cart there, and he told the housekeeping to keep the cart, to leave it in the room.
Yeah.
And that's what he used to put the camera on and so forth. So that's my theory.
Mark, have you ever followed or even watched YouTube when researching this event? No. Well, tell a lie. The only thing I've really looked at was some of Mike's stuff, but that was just purely at a glance.
Not because it was just the best shit you'd ever seen?
No. Because the way I run my research is I do not let conspiracies and misinformation fog my research.
Are you saying I do?
I'm not saying a word like that, Mike. I'm not pushing your truck again, so be quiet. I don't. I'm just seeing what.
I'm the same way. When I was lambasted in the beginning of this, and all the way throughout, and even to this day, even Thumper is one of the people that has just been a thorn in my side. But in the very beginning, it was people were getting upset because I was putting out. I would make certain before I put a video out that the information I was putting into the video was either as 100% or as close to accurate as possible. And the main thing is I only had to go back on things I've said maybe a couple of times. The first one was the first shots being shot towards the tanks. When I found out that was not the case, then I redid that and corrected it. Most of these other people don't, obviously clearly don't do that. There was quite a few things that were like that, but the main thing was some of the information I was receiving, I was giving to the attorneys. So some of the information has never even to this day made it to YouTube or whatever, but it was primarily so that they had accurate information. And maybe one day I'll release a couple of the other things that I had. I'll show them to you, but
I'm just looking at some of the funny comments in here, Mike, from Thumper.
Oh yeah, he's hilarious.
I'm just looking now. I think we missed a question as we were rambling on.
Oh, it's probably Thumper went off. That was when Thumper was asking about you seeing other people's videos or seeing YouTube videos, and then someone said something to him, and he just was wondering if he used any of the content. Obviously, no one's going to go to YouTube to really look for content normally, or evidence, but you never know. Sometimes you do.
I'm trying to see what Seattle's about calling dysfunctional is funny thumper. I can't see what she's referring to on that.
Thumper has.
Oh yeah, I've got you.
A dysfunctional thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've met a lot of people on this research, and there's only about 4 or 5 that I genuinely do believe in what they're saying.
Right. Which I was
on the research side, not on my source side, because I don't want to offend my sources, because I know there are a few of my sources watching this tonight. I've seen a lot of disinformation in the wider public domain, and that's what's led, to all of this conspiracy theories and conjecture. And you mix in the fact that LVMPD did a half-assed job of their investigation, because there was really no emphasis on them to do anything of substance, because there was no terrorism links. It was just a crazy white guy. It just gets stupid after a while.
There's modus operandi. Some of the things that came out early on, people turned to YouTube, I guess, primarily because in the early throes of the event, the mainstream media was just all over the map as far as whatever. You had Sheriff Lombardo out there saying that we engaged the suspect, when obviously to you and I, that obviously clearly means one thing.
Yeah.
And obviously that wasn't the case. So after those few interviews, and then once I started seeing certain FBI individuals stand behind Sheriff Lombardo constantly, I started realizing that, okay, this is now going to be the information coming out will be strictly sifted through, and that's exactly what happened. So
yeah, there was a lot of again, I mean, I think I was in the UK when this happened. My wife and I were over there on a vacation seeing my family, and we were either just going over there or we'd just got back. And it was seriously, utterly unbelievable to put the news on one day and just suddenly see this. And, I've spoken to various sources who were there on the night, some who were there in the aftermath to do various things. And even they couldn't believe it with all their years of training and experiences. I just want to go back onto... okay. No, it's not that one. I've got a picture on this hard drive. So no, I haven't got the. Just trying to find a certain picture, but I haven't got it, unfortunately.
I'm not going to let him see this one.
Which one was that, Mike?
I don't know. You want to see it?
Yeah, go on.
I'll show it to you.
It wasn't from your truck of death, was it?
No.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yes, I just blew you, Bear.
I didn't.
Let's see. Vice.
I'm just looking now. See if there's any things we're missing. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, if you guys got questions, feel free. Try to do them in all caps. It's very difficult to scroll through these to determine what's what. So if you have a question specifically for us, myself or Mark, it doesn't matter. You can put Mike or Mark in front of it, but try to do it in all caps. That way we can quickly look at it and know immediately that it's a question for us. And yes, that was Rouse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at Cial's comment here where it was a lot of the conspiracy theorists were going on about they weren't real bullets or rounds fired into the crowd and everything else. It really was. Oh, there's your eviction letter.
Yeah.
That it really was a conspiracy theorist wet dream what happened, because they've really gone to town on it, which is disrespectful to the victims, I believe. It's the suffering and pain caused that night on all the people in that venue and the families that lost loved ones. These conspiracy theorists really need a hard look at their lives. Taking place that night. No, there was not a MACTAC train, and that was very quickly dispelled. It was a stupid online course that most officers had to do. It was a memo that went out, part of the police union. There was a training exercise taking place for canine officers at a nursery. That's why Bitsco was out there, that is so close to the scene. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people misrepresent what training actually goes on with police. No, the MACTAC training the police officers were referring to is their annual tests, annual training. They have to go through once a year, just go through tactical training. So,
I'm just putting up random shots.
Yeah, I was just looking at Alan's comment question. Yeah, that's the one. I mean, it was just so disorganized that night. There were instances that people, police, various areas of the police wouldn't coordinate with with other departments, and I think it was just utterly unbelievable of what actually happened.
Agreed.
I think it was just no one could actually believe what was going on, so people were searching for answers. Have you got any actual pictures of substance, Mike? Not just.
Well, I'm just running stuff in the background here, but I do have pictures of substance. I'm kind of scrolling through it. My other hard drive is FUBAR at the moment, so I'm actually going through my initial drive. But yeah, this is there's your.
Oh yeah, service elevators.
Mm-hmm. You can see it still says 32 on it. This was before I made my first trip. This literally was. I made it through the door, took a picture, and then I walked back out the door. But I took the picture, and then I walked back to my room to look at the picture to see if there was any cameras in here. And when I first went in there, I thought this thing up here was possibly a camera. And so I went back, and I took another picture just to make it certain. And then I kind of like farted around in the room and, took some selfies, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But, yeah, that was kind of a unique moment. And then this is... that the room 32219 is virtually identical to 32134. So this section of the room here was the same, and I did a walkthrough also of that room.
I'm just looking at some of the questions. No, Alan, you're correct. There wouldn't be any live fire, so to speak. Where's the Alabet net? Well, I don't know which documentary that was.
That's the scene from the room there. There's another conspiracy. Remember, they talked about the towers. Somebody was up here. That idiot. What was his name? The guy that said I'm going to show you the location of the second shooter, and he came in and did all that. Some whatever it was.
Well, I'd like to know how they scaled those towers, because there's no way to access them unless you're on a crane.
Yeah, well, I went in the towers, and so when I did, I came back around this side of this hotel down here. The fence was down, and I just walked over and came through, and then I came through this direction as well. But I went in the towers and showed the inside of the towers, and that way people could see. There was no stairs in there. There's no elevator in there. There's no way to get up to the top of the tower. So. Is there a link to watch Money Machine for free? No, actually, don't be a cheapskate, man. There's no link to watch it for free. It will be put on television, a certain network. I won't mention it, but if you have that network, you'll be able to see it. But you got to support the people. I don't make any money off Money Machine, just so you know, not a dime. So, but you got to support the people that do. So obviously, paying a few dollars to see something, a documentary that's as well put out as Money Machine is, should be worth to do it. And it's not that much.
I'm seeing LVSA are asking if we'll ever see the full FBI report, and I don't know if Michelle's referring to that comment or
he's referring to the FBI report that would actually show this bullet came from this gun and hit that person, and that's what you'd have to have if this had ever gone to actual trial.
Yeah,
they would have to put the weapon in the hands of Paddock, which would be fingerprints and so forth. Then they would have to have the striation marks or whatever on the bullets, and then that would have to match the bullet that hit a particular person down in the venue. That's the level of evidence that some people need to believe that Paddock was actually the shooter. There's such a mountain of evidence that proves he was a shooter that, in my mind, I don't have to get to that point, but I do understand if it went to court, they would have to do that.
Yeah.
So, no, you will not see that report, by the
way. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I wonder if Michelle's replying to that comment. Because I know someone put a request in for the full report, but I don't think it's been granted yet.
Well, coming, Michelle, when is that's the 28 CDs coming? It should be probably in a few months.
March, apparently, according to Michelle.
Yeah.
Don't hold your breath on that one because they've got a current backlog at the moment.
Well, they sent another update saying that it seemed to be everything's on par. Because I remember Michelle, when we first got the word that it was going to be 21 months or 2.5 years, whatever it was. So like, oh my God, that seemed like a lifetime. But here we are, very close to it, and it's going to be pretty interesting. It's 28 CDs. It's basically 14,000 pages of documents and stuff that will be on that. So yes, that will probably come out. We may not see it, but there is a FBI ballistics report, but it doesn't go. It's not done like some of the other ones. The information I have on it, which is, well, I can't say how. Let's just say the ballistics report that's internal to the FBI, that is the one that we will not see, goes into some detail over that information, but it's not as complete. In other words, people would be very pissed off if they saw it.
Alan, another, just to interject there, Mike. Yeah. Another reason, Alan, why they're not releasing the actual dossier of ballistics report is because it identifies the victims quite in depth.
Yeah.
And I believe they're trying to do it to save the heartache of the families, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
Even redacted is an issue. Remember back when the autopsy reports came out, and then myself, Laura Loomer, and a couple somebody else who I don't really want to mention Jason's name. Oh shit, my bad. We actually got part of the actual autopsy report. I ended up getting the full report, and no, that'll never be released because it does go into graphic detail, and it has images, has pictures, and all this other stuff, and that will never be released. Even if they heavily redacted it, it would be so redacted that it would be virtually useless. So the autopsy report that's like even the one for Stephen Paddock that's put into the FIT report, it's very very much not necessarily redacted, but that version is just a nothing version. It doesn't go into detail about what they're looking at.
I'm seeing what I think Michelle's leaving us because she said, "Okay, I'm going. Cheers." Yeah, I mean, our VMPD were just, let's say that they'd got their man, so to speak, and they just really couldn't care less. They just wanted it done as quick as they could. And that's not being offensive to, because there are some good officers on the force. I'm not saying there isn't. It's just,
I would say Matchko would be in that category.
Yeah, I mean, there's countless officers from that night that were, on that were there that night that were high caliber officers. And I know we've got a mutual friend, Mike, that keeps running LVMPD into the ground. But in anything you'll find in life, as everyone knows by now, there is a small sect of rotten apples, no matter where you go, whether it's in the police force, the military, even in a civilian place of work, there is always rotten apples that spoil it for everyone. I agree, Alan. It is right. People need to see the full report because, or certain respects.
Agreed.
And again, I mean, a lot of people, especially, I mean, I know there's a couple of people on this feed tonight who were there on that fateful night and were either physically or mentally scarred by what they endured. When you get people like myself and Mike, when we can tract ourselves on a personal level away from the human aspect, it's a lot easier to see the full reality of why things aren't released. And well, that's the wanted thing for and in some respects they've got to be honest and open, but in other respects they have to protect the victims and their families.
This is a shot that I got the morning after, just so I've shown it to people before, but not like this way here. This picture was taken at about 10:30 on the morning after. The attorneys needed to know where stuff was. They were there to go through the venue with the 3D mapping machine, stuff like this, and it was mentioned to me, God, it would be nice to have images from that morning so we could tell where everything was. And so they were actually going through images that people took from their hotel rooms and stuff like this. And so I told Catherine, I said, how about I just get a satellite photo from that morning? And she said, what? So here it is, folks. This is the satellite image from that morning after, showing where all the buses were and all the vehicles and stuff. And you can see here where they put all the people's belongings. They were starting to, put it in these areas right here. But this is the van there from the coroner's department. And
I'm just looking at the Saint made a couple of comments, and yeah, police officers are human. People forget that. I've spoken to several who were in the direct line of fire. Many of them did closing on the hotel. Some of them went back into the venue to try and get people out. And, that they are human. People do freeze. It's part of life. And then there are other reasons to why certain things haven't been released. But I'm not going to go down that track, so that's for other people to do. This is victims.
This is the list that back in the day I claimed that I had, but I could not actually show anyone because of the source and what have you. But if anyone remembers back when people were saying whatever, that I didn't have this or that or whatever, this is it.
And I agree with Siao comment. People do forget 58 people were tragically killed. And the families do need privacy and protection. I mean, they really do. And people don't, we as the outside public, for people who weren't there, will never understand the true horror of what people went through. And, I, for one, if I lost any close relatives or anything, I certainly wouldn't want the world's media climbing over my deceased relatives' memory, because the media have a very funny habit of spinning things to their own advantage, and that's, and like when I went to Vegas, I was shocked. In fact, my wife and I went to Vegas about 3 weeks before I made my second trip to do my research, and we walked the Strip. And we went to the Mandalay Bay. It was shocking in one sense that there was no memorial to the victims anywhere close. And, then you've got to understand that these people own a business and they've got to turn a profit. And it's as sick as it sounds. It genuinely is the truth. And it's not good for business if you've got a memorial to 58 people that were tragically killed. What about license plate?
Where's the
LVSA, Mike, has just come through.
Yeah, the plate that you sent to me. You can send. I'm trying to remember which one we're talking about.
I know it's Tony. He's looking for someone that knows about a license plate. Blood 2 or 11 or. And then LVSA asked about what license plate. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, Tony, which license plate are you talking about? If you're talking about the one that's on the black Suburban.
And Jeff, I agree that, in a situation like that, I've been in situations I was one where I could defend myself. So it wasn't as horrific as yours because you had no way of defending yourselves, but you really don't have time to think,
Yeah, and the Memory Garden is almost 8 miles away. It's not even, you're right, it's not in the same city. It's Paradise is the actual city where the shooting occurred, and it's in Las Vegas, basically near downtown. Yeah. And where it's at, I did a video on it, one showing, at the end of the video, I showed the area that surrounds it. It's just not, in my opinion, it's the only memorial I've ever seen that is not where the actual event occurred. That's the only one I've ever. I don't know if you've been, how many memorials you've been to, Mark, but can you recall going to a memorial where the memorial was at a location?
No. I mean, I've been to quite a few memorials for various things, and most of them are right on the spot, or at least within 100 yards. And again, it's one of those things you've got to look at it from another angle. If you suddenly get off the plane at McCarran and drive down into Las Vegas Boulevard and see this memorial to 58 people that were tragically killed, you're going to be a bit apprehensive. And people, they are businesses, and it's horrible to think, and they really shouldn't think like that. There should be something to the victims in that area, not just to the ones that were killed, but also the ones that still suffer with physical and mental trauma to this day. Because paying them a sum of money isn't going to ever take away what happened. Even just a plaque on the actual grounds would be suffice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just something just to give a recognition that it actually happened, because it really doesn't seem like, war memorials is totally different to. In fact, I don't know if I've got. I think I might have it.
I've got the memorial here.
No, they're on about the. You normally find the memorials where it happened.
Right.
Let me just drag this over here. So, this is the sort of memorials that I've been to. Images. So, this is. Let me just see if I can get that up in big format. Agreed. So, when I say memorials that I've been to, this is the type that.
I've been like 9/11.
I've been to
all those, Shanksville, all that. All right, here we go.
So that's a memorial that I relate to. That's a place called Tyncott in Belgium. Over 150,000 British soldiers are buried there from the First World War, and there are another 85,000 listed on the walls around it that were never found. So that's what I mean when I say a memorial's on the site. It's very close to it. So there you go. So I don't understand Kips. Oh yeah, Vegas is dead right now because of COVID. That they won't ever build on that lot. The Saint. I believe, with respect to the Saints comment, Mike, I believe there's a police training center going there, and then
they're doing it's a parking lot for the stadium is what it's going to end up.
That's right. And then, I thought they were doing some sort of police training center there after a certain time.
Well, that in the beginning, they were going to gift it to the SWAT team. Was one of the initial things that they had planned to do. That obviously, gladly that didn't happen because that was just slapping everyone's face. But yeah, they're going to have they called it one of the sports centers is going to be there. So any of the players that are, working out and whatever, you'll be able to go see that.
Yeah.
One of the proposals I brought up was that they need to put some sort of memorial there that doesn't necessarily have the backdrop of Mandalay Bay, but something there, like some little area where you have some fountains or anything to recognize that spot. If you just cover that spot up and put a parking lot on it, that, in my opinion, is very disrespectful.
It is. That is.
I agree.
That is very disrespectful. I'm in shock. I'm shocked at the way various corporations have handled this, and it is completely baffling. I don't know what Mike's trying to do now.
This is going to show you. This is going from the venue, and this is to give you an idea for people that haven't been here. This is going to show you just
memorial.
Yeah, this is a time lapse or hyperlapse video of me driving to the Memorial Garden. You can see there it's 13 minutes away. It's I got it covered, but it's 7.4 miles. Let me put a shorter thing on there so it doesn't cover it, but it's not even remotely close. Now it's pretty when you're inside. I have to admit that it is nice looking, and I'll show that video in the background later. But I just have a problem with it, and so a lot of people got on to me about that issue. Why do you not like the Healing Garden? Well, I like the Healing Garden. I just don't like where it's at. It's not convenient. You'll see there's a sex shop right next door to it it's a bus stop on one side. So, and then there's a lot of homeless people that was there. And I remember Eddie used to have to go in and try to, run these people out of there because they were sleeping inside the Memorial Garden. So, and I get it, I don't have no qualms with people, but when they go in there and they defecate in there and they do other things, it's very disrespectful. That's Melissa there. So every time I see her, I just want to cry. But shit, I shouldn't have looked at the screen. Anyway, so but it's very pretty the way it's done. And I'll do a slower video there in a second, but it's not in a good spot. Then you can see here, I go around the outside and I show some of the area around it, but I stopped, and of course there's a sex shop right next door. And, I took issue with that. So there's some of the stuff that was there that's out by the dumpster. Yeah. It was quite irritating. And, so I'll stop it before it gets to the end, because I showed something else on there. So cool. Anyway.
What's the name of is that Tony Simply? What's he referring to? Street, the Jesus Street?
The Jesus Street?
Jesus Street?
The street that he lives on?
Yes.
I won't give that out, because keep in mind, I accidentally put up a certain SWAT team member's phone number and I didn't get in trouble for it, but the people that wanted to get me in trouble decided to call LVMPD and tell them what I had done. But the funny thing was they screwed up, not thinking I would find that out. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Something you're not aware of, Mark. It's a whole nother area of contention here.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Any other questions we got there? And because we'll start wrapping this up before too long, but I'll go as long as necessary.
Yeah. So if people have got questions and I can answer them, or you can answer them, I'm more than happy to stay on.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely was forgotten. The thing was Vegas needed to get back to business as usual.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you got the mayor and he's definitely the sharpest tool in the shed, who essentially the whole city is based on the casino, the gambling industry, and every industry that relates to it, plus conventions and so forth. I understand they need to get back to business as usual as quickly as possible to get the people working again or whatever. But at the same time, when this event happened, they basically disrespected the whole event, because 58 people died.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, another event happened and everything switched over to the school shooting, but which I also understand. But the way that they tried to not necessarily cover up things, but the way that they tried to quickly get past this was disrespectful to anyone that had anything to do with it, had family members that lost or whatever. Because you're trying to get news, you're trying to get information, you're trying to find out what's going on, and next thing you know, they just put nothing. And when the mainstream media couldn't get information from the powers that be, the law enforcement agencies and what have you, then they stopped reporting on it, because there's just no real new news. But they came to YouTube because we had new news every day. Unfortunately, some of it was like, Hoover and his damn helicopter theory and some of this other stupid crap. So it was very difficult for people to figure out what was real and what wasn't.
And again, it was one of those things where once a lot of the witness statements were released, it muddied the waters even more when you had journalists who ran off down the wrong tangent with stupid witness statements. I mean, that there was some witness statements within the release that should never have been in there, because they really didn't have any bearing on the event itself. There's a famous one that it makes me chuckle every time I read it, because it was broadcast all over the world as some sort of fact where there was a meeting in a car park between the shooter and some guy who the shooter was trying to put illicit plans or get this guy to turn his ARs into fully automatic. And the media ran with that. And when you actually look at the context of that, it was by a guy who was actually in prison. He couldn't even describe the shooter,
Yep.
And the media ran with it as if it was a fact, So then you had that muddy in the waters, and then we had people trying to make connections to ISIS and still trying to make connections to ISIS, which they weren't there. I mean, the intelligence agencies, within the first 4 hours of this happening, pretty much discounted that.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I was on the phone with several of some old friends of mine when that was being brought up, and I remember having a long conversation with Laura Loomer, because Laura went on with that, and I told her, I said, look, I said, I even had her on one of the calls. I said, you heard from their mouth that there's nothing there. So, and she was saying because they claimed 2 times that they had done this event, and it would be one of the very few times that they had claimed that they had done something, and they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and then the reason they claimed it twice was because the gravity of the situation. I mean, that they wanted to be seen as this, but in respect to Alan, he wanted to. Yeah, that's the one. But then it is possible, it is feasible. But when you actually read the entire witness statement, the guy's very vague on everything. The FBI, you can blatantly tell, don't believe a word he's saying. The LVMPD officer, you can just see the looks on their faces thinking, what the hell are we doing here? They're in a county lockup. The guy's being as evasive as anything. And they say to him, well, if you know this is illegal, why didn't you come to us sooner? Why have you? I think it was like 3 weeks after the actual event, wasn't it, Mike? The guy gave a statement.
Right.
He tried to give some stupid, I mean, then you get things like the Saudi prince. As I've proven tonight, yes, there were people in the area of high esteem, people in the very hotel. But
MBL wasn't one of them, though.
No. And it's just muddied the waters quite literally, because people just don't know what to believe anymore. And that's part of the reason behind the 1 October book, is because when I was doing my research, that there was just so much disinformation out there. It was just unbelievable.
It was. And keep in mind, too, when they went into the Luxor, if everybody, or rather the other hotel, when they went in with that team that everybody thought was MBL and what have you, and they had the stretcher and stuff like that, they were actually going in there to pull the servers. There was 11 servers. I think it was 11 servers that were pulled out of there. The other servers were at Switch, which is the people that handle the backbone for Mandalay.
Well, Mike, you need to back up a bit, because they weren't just there to pull servers. They were there because they believed there was a shooter in the Luxor. So they went in, but what actually was it was a mixture of 2 things. One was
it was Excalibur.
One was the fact that the person from the Mandalay Bay couldn't get through to the security desk, so they phoned the Luxor, and the Luxor believed it was in their hotel.
Right.
And then the next one was you had a plainclothes police officer go in the back door of the Excalibur, the Luxor, sorry. Mm-hmm. All people saw was a guy running through with a firearm. That's all they saw.
Yep.
And then they saw people covered in blood. So then at that point, people reacted to it. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about the leaked phone image?
Yeah,
Mike and I have gone over this. It's quite plain to see when you look through the evidence who actually leaked the phone image.
Yeah, we know who did.
Yeah, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to work that one out.
Yeah, without a doubt. That was my baby really early on, was trying to figure that one out. Laura had reported that a certain individual was having a relationship with a certain former reporter. Now, this reporter, Jackie Heinrich, used to be in Las Vegas. And apparently, or allegedly, I'll say the word allegedly just to be nice, she had a relationship with a particular SWAT team member, and that once she left Las Vegas and went to Boston, and she became part of Boston's ABC 25, while there, she somehow mysteriously received these images. So these leaked images were coming out of Boston, and so people were wondering, why wouldn't they? If somebody's leaking images, it would make sense that it would be in the Las Vegas area, so I'm going to get them. But it went there, and Jackie Heinrich got them. And I made the contention that it was done by Levi Hancock. I stand by that to this day. I have proof that it was done by Levi Hancock. And Levi, if you want to ever challenge me, sue me on that, because I would love to have to bring that out in discovery.
There was I mean, it was people have, I think it was Jeff mentioned it was it was just a crazy night, and people just had droves of people just running in anywhere to take cover, and they were covered in blood. Or, I think it was on the Money Machine where you were interviewing an attorney who, I think it was one of the hotel workers had told her to go to bed because she was drunk.
Yeah. And it said you had obviously spilled spaghetti on your dress and blah, blah, blah. And it was, obviously what it was. But that's just.
Yeah, it was just conflicting reports. You've got at least 14,000 people dispersing out of a single venue, literally running for their lives. Some were covered in blood, some weren't. That there was I read a report from a police officer who was at one of the hospitals who was sent there to help out with the casualties. And she said, all she ever remembers is seeing muddy footprints all over the hospital, and she couldn't figure out where they came from. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until the next day she was asked to go down and help with the evidence collection, and she suddenly walked into the venue and saw hundreds of shoes sunk in a mud pile, because people were running out and losing their shoes or whatever. So there is feasible explanations as to what occurred in some respects. And unfortunately, you get conspiracy theorists who jump on the bandwagon and try and muddy the waters because they think it makes them look good. Everyone wants their 5 minutes of fame. But unfortunately, that 5 minutes of fame causes harm to the victims who survived and is detrimental to everyone else.
True.
It was.
Go ahead.
No, so I was. LVSA made a remark. It was a Tropicana. There was a lot, I know the Tropicana, the Luxor, New York.
I didn't hit send. I thought I hit send on that one.
There was a, it was all over. It was a 4 mile square crime scene in the end.
Yeah.
When you read the dispatch logs and you hear, that they're using T-shirts or whatever as tourniquets because there wasn't enough. There was no other gunshots other than what was it from the Mandalay Bay into the venue.
And I can say that with a percentage of a surety very close to 100% because I spent I don't know how many hours listening to the audio and doing this, and I can even pull up the file if you guys want to actually see it. I can do this live. Pull the file up and show you how you can tell the difference between the gunshots and other shots. But the problem is that when I originally went through it, I did this for the attorneys. Remember back when I kept saying I was going to show you guys the audio acoustic analysis after that, goofball, whatever his name is, the neutral, whatever the guy's name is that came out with the first thing. I'll show you the second shooter. And I couldn't because that information was still being, for some reason, held. The attorneys wanted to keep it close, and so I didn't bring that out. And that's the reason why. So to this day, I didn't do it. So when October 1 Sounds came out and started doing it, that was perfect because it kind of got some of the heat off of my back. Plus with what Mr. Visual had done, but there was no doubt that if there was a shot fired anywhere else, we would have heard it. We would have heard it, no matter how far away you were within the realm of reason. Within a mile, we would have heard that shot, or we would have picked up the shot on multiple body-worn camera footage. So if someone shoots inside Bellagio and there's a cop standing outside, and the cop outside doesn't, hear or near where the shot was, then that just means something of less intensity was the source of it. A guy dropping his luggage, someone, you're doing something. So that's where all that came from. So I can sit here and say with almost 100%, there were no shots fired that night anywhere else other than room 32135. And there were 2 shooters that were in that room that night. One was Stephen Paddock, and the other was Sean O'Donnell. That's it. So
I mean, you had the shooter himself, and then you had a police officer that was scared. He just breached a room of what was believed to be a scene of someone firing multiple. When the police are seeing multiple muzzle flashes out the window, no one could comprehend that this guy had, the shooter had over 20 weapons in his room. Or thousands of rounds of ammunition. No one could comprehend that. It just didn't sink into anyone. So when police breach it, especially when they weren't SWAT officers, there was only one SWAT officer that went in there. He was scared. I mean, anyone would be. And when they breached that second door, Yeah, I mean, Alan just said, I still don't know what that chair ever did to O'Donnell. Yeah, I mean, I've stacked up on a door before, and I can tell you now, it's not the nicest thing to do. And when you breach that door, you don't know what's the other side.
Right.
You know there's two windows broken, so you naturally assume there's two shooters. People didn't realize that was one shooter running between two rooms. So then you get the ND, or the negligent discharge, as it was. But there was only one shooter. There was never anything more than that.
That is true.
Any questions? Any other questions? Anything about Campos or
research? I want to go into some areas that you feel that you have special knowledge on that has not. Well, I know some of the stuff we can't talk about, but some of the areas where you have certain knowledge of that has not necessarily been revealed, or and I'm not going to go into the area that I'm thinking of, but I won't do that. But anyway, maybe talk about some things that that people just generally have not heard that you have special knowledge of. And how you got that.
Say again?
And how you got that knowledge. I'm teasing on that.
or how I push your truck off a garage of a gas station forecourt.
Exactly.
I mean, I really can't divulge too much live because I've got to sit down and but I divulge as much as I can because again I've got sources that have spoken to me confidentially.
Right.
Bracket for old time's sake. Thoughts on the bracket? Okay. Someone made a question earlier. Levi and our friends. Well, apparently Jeff and Levi are friends on Facebook. So there you go. The thoughts on the bracket, Mike from the Saint. Mine is quite simple. Someone hit on a point earlier where it was believed, Campos may have heard the drilling, or he claimed to hear drilling. I believe he did hear drilling as he was walking up the stairs towards the 32nd floor. And I believe, like someone pointed out earlier, that he interrupted the shooter putting the bracket on the door because this guy who was meticulous in his planning only puts 3 screws in a bracket that takes 4. Then he goes back, goes up a floor, not down a floor like he claimed. He suddenly walks up this hallway, checks the room that he's got to check. Then he's confronted with a room service cart that's got cameras on. Then he finds a bracket on the door. Anyone would now be scared because it doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to work out there's going to be an issue. Then suddenly, you try and report. You report down to your superiors what you're seeing. You neglect to mention the cart because you just want to get the hell out of there because it looks bad, so you don't want to be around in the middle of the heat, so to speak. And before he could leave that foyer, the shooter opened fire. He hid in there for at least 5 minutes, and then he made his run for it. The shooter saw him for whatever reason, fired through the door. A ricochet or a fragment hit Campos on the leg. He took cover. Another person comes around the other end of the hallway. The shooter, and that's why I think the shooter slowly, gradually wound down because I think he believed that the police were closing in, but it actually wasn't. It was hotel staff. And it just, the shooter wasn't going to be taken alive either way. He was going to go out on his own terms. As horrible as it is, it's, that was the plan. I mean, he had out of all the pistols he owned, he took a single revolver. And again, people have even tried to interject that the revolver was so significant because his dad had used that type of revolver when he was arrested in Vegas. People just read so much into things, it's stupid. So
it's some people. I think a lot of it has to do with distrust of the government. That's obvious. Yeah. There's a certain point where you almost just want to say, look, before I talk to you, do you believe in chemtrails? Yes. Okay, never mind. And you would just walk away and you're done. Don't try to convince them of anything, and you're over it. But there's a mixture. Sometimes there's people that are kind of in that middle where they really just don't know and they're naive or they just simply don't have the answer. So whatever answers make sense to them becomes the answer. And the problem with that sometimes is they actually, once they have that for a period of time, that to them becomes the only answer, and then they shut down everything else, and it's unfortunate.
So in respect to Seattle, yes, I will. I think I did that when the book's published. The same to the Saint. Yeah, so in respect to Alan, I am to bear first. I'll give you, it was a delight being here. So yeah, the revolver thing actually comes from Mike. Could you highlight Alan's comment, the one about the revolver? So that actually comes from a report I found written by a very eminent psychologist who tried to make a lot of connections to stuff that wasn't there, and published a paper called The Paddock Puzzle. And I know Mike had given it to Eric, and Eric pretty much laughed at it because of the contents of it. It was some of it was accurate, but a lot of it was just conjecture that he had drawn from historical.
He's filling in the gaps with his own thoughts there, and you could tell.
Yeah, and it's right. The Saint's right. If not just Lombardo, but if the whole of LVMPD or certain members of LVMPD had been transparent, there would be less conspiracy theories. But it was just a massive confusion and chaos.
And what's odd, that was what he ran on. He ran on that theme that he's going to bring transparency to LVMPD because LVMPD obviously has this history, and it wasn't so. It just did not end up being the case.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think I've still got a copy of the link for the report. I'll send it on to Mike so he can post it on his page and people can then have a look at it. The report really isn't worth the paper it's written on. It's just one of those things that during the course of research, you look at it, you get a second opinion, and then you look at, viable facts. Good night, Tony.
Night, Tony.
Any other questions from anyone?
If not, we will begin to wrap this up. I'm sure Mark will, I won't speak for him, but hopefully he'll come on down the road if some other stuff comes up. Or
hang on. There's another question just come through, Mike.
Campos and why? Okay, we can both answer that one.
Yeah, Campos was a liability in the sense of he could blow the whole thing for MGM and they would end up owning a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the Memorial Garden was placed where it was, because MGM didn't want to lose any revenue. As horrible as it is, it really was that simple. And, they paid him for his silence.
The initial payment that was made to him, which is quite more substantial now. This is news that I got later. I think Mark even helped me out on this. But the initial payment that's paid to him was around $300,000. It was.
Mike, are you still there? I think Mike's
Okay, am I in there now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm having let me cut off some of these screens. I think I got a video that's running in the background, might be eating some bandwidth, so I'll kill that.
How about Campos being given 2 condos?
Yeah, Campos is given 2 condos. I have the address. I've been to them. I've seen where I've obviously been to where he lives, and so I know they run the 2 condos that he has runs around $2,600 a month on each one. So he has 2. They're right across the hall from each other. One for him, one for his brother-in-law, and so forth. But yeah, that's what happened. Just so you guys know, the information that I have was Campos faked the injury to his leg over a certain period of time, because he was seen in a specific room at the Aria, I think that's what it's pronounced. And I have images of that. I might even be able to pull them up, but yeah, so he was there, and he's milking that injury for whatever it was, because it's a fluctuant. And I think
what was Xiao? Why do you think they said F Campos in body cam? I've never seen that. I've never heard it. Mike, if you've got a copy of it, I'll be interested to see it.
Actually, I'll say if he's in here, he might actually know what the number is on that. I can't remember off the top of it, but yeah, you can hear them saying, F Campos or what have you. I think obviously that shows, Campos, even hopefully if he ever watches this, it doesn't matter. He's dumber than a bag of rocks. I mean, the guy's just not really that intelligent. And so what was happening was apparently people were going off on the way he handled things or what have you, and a lot of people just didn't agree with it, which we all don't really agree with some of the stuff to this day.
Yeah,
especially him being called a hero, which obviously is clearly not the case.
That's a contradiction in terms in respect to him. Laura Loomer's in El Salvador, I believe.
Yeah,
I've got better intelligence than you on that one, Mike.
I can imagine, because somebody that's related to Laura.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things. Actually, the first message he sent me was, I think we have a common something. However you worded it.
It was a mutual friend or something like that.
Yeah, mutual friend or whatever. And I said, I was thinking it was somebody else. And then when he told me Loomer, I was like, no way. So,
so I've never actually met Laura. I've vaguely spoken to the connection once or twice, but I've never spoke to Laura personally.
Lucky you.
The Campos was an actor. That Campos. Listen, I don't like Campos. I've got no time of day for him. But every time he's made a media appearance, it was definitely him. And I am to bear. You settled for 300,000. No, he settled for a lot more than that, to be quite honest.
It ended up being more. The initial one was what I was told was 300.
It's a lot. As much as we want to run Campos down, the guy really was a victim in all of this as well.
Yeah, he was.
We can't detract that from him. But what we can detract from him is his contradictory statements before, during, and after. He claims he told some woman to get back in her room, and that person's never. I've spoken to virtually everyone that was on that floor, and no one ever stepped out their room. They were too. They couldn't. They were too scared. I mean, the people that were outside the venue could hear the shots, and obviously it was being reflected upon them. So you can imagine what that sound was like up on the floor. Mm-hmm. It really was deafening. And no matter who you are, you're not going to leave your room if it's your safe haven.
Larry brought up how's Eric and his mother holding up these days. Eric's doing fine. I had lunch with him a few weeks ago, but his mother's not in such good health at the moment. So that's what's happening there. So I won't go any more depth in that, because I'm sure Eric's watching this, or probably will watch it. But anyway, Eric's doing fine, and we discuss things. Some things are off the wall, and when we go back to this stuff, the most recent thing was obviously the bump stock manufacturer actually suing the victims fund to get money to pay them back for the money they lost in sales. Yeah, that pissed me off. That was a bad PR move on their part. And then, of course, the answer, they never really answered it, but they alluded to that they weren't suing the victims. They attempted to sue basically Paddock's estate, which they apparently, for some reason, failed to understand was gifted to the victims fund. So those attorneys were not really doing their homework, whenever they did what they did. This just makes no sense why you would do that. So
yeah, in respect to the Saint, most people would have freaked out in the position that Campos was in as well. I agree. I mean, it's one of those positions that no one hopes they find. No one wants to find themselves in that position. And yes, Cial's right. He did milk it for everything he could. The engineer Stephen Schuck. I think he never did, actually. I think he just...
He did receive something, but it wasn't the same way that Jesus did. Jesus got money specifically, from my understanding, based on the information I have, as close to as you can get, is that the money Jesus received was directly for him to not say stuff. Schuck received money as well, but I don't know the amount or the stipulation behind it, but I don't think it was the same exact pretense of what happened.
No, I don't think it was, because Schuck really wasn't an eyewitness to anything, just apart from he was shot at.
Right.
Where Campos was on that. As I say, there's 15 to 20 minutes missing from Campos's time on that floor or during that night on the way to the floor. So something, within the book, it expands upon the theory a lot more, and there's a lot more evidence to back it up. Campos either witnessed something, or he saw some, or he heard something which maybe he should have reported it. Yeah, exactly. See, it was hush money for Campos. There's rampant theories about that guy, and it's just, he's just one of those people that, unfortunately, don't
sugarcoat it, Mark. Just spit it.
Yeah, he's.
We're both sitting here knowing that we're trying to have that face of man. I really love to tell you guys what exactly I'm thinking at the moment, but we have that filter that comes on that stops us from doing that.
Because I just can't stand the guy. Everything I've seen about him, everything I've read about him, everything I've researched about him is complete. I mean, I'm just dumbfounded why no one's taken him out by now. I really am. I mean, I'm really surprised no one tried to do it. I'm surprised no one has ever tried to put an attempt on his life, because the guy's upset a lot of people.
And that's why I won't give out his address, because somebody would probably do it.
Here's one.
Yes, there was 220 or so cameras that were out that day.
Allegedly. There's
3,300 cameras that were put in. There was at different times, and according to Tony, the guy that was the head of that section at that time, he says over 200 cameras were out that day, according to him. So that's yeah. I can pull up that interview if anyone wants to see it.
No, I remember it. They were claiming there was so many cameras out, but the joke of it is none of the cameras. There was no cameras on the floor, so there was really no evidence of it anyway. It's nothing. This is the harsh reality: is no matter what, it could never have been averted because there was no cameras up on the floor, so no one could really see what was going on up on those floors. There's still no cameras actually up on the floors, and
never will be.
No, and the shooter was very clever how he hid the weapons in the room. I mean, he had cleaning staff in there, and he must have had something in the room, and then suddenly, he built his arsenal up even more after that. So, it's a tragic and horrific event that unfolded, and from what I've seen, there really was no way to avert it, apart from no, I'm just looking at Larry Ross. No one will ever truly know. We'll come on to the timestamps in a minute, CL. But listen, no one can ever get into the mind of the shooter, not even Mike or his brother, because no one can ever truly delve that deep. But I think that was just a false trail. The guy wasn't stupid. And if anyone would have been watching him, I think, he was trying to. I think in his own mind, I think he was genuinely believed he was being watched by someone, because the emails that he was sending to himself was, I think, more of a way to see if he was being watched. Because if he was being monitored for anything, that would be some keywords they would pick up on. Okay, missing timestamps in the elevator, CCTV with Paddock. Basically the whole system was out of sync, and they can never admit that.
Right. And what you saw on ABC, if you look carefully at the timestamp that they did put on there, you'll see that it has a semicolon where you can see they inserted a fake timestamp. But that was elevator S10, and S10 is the elevator that comes up behind the restaurant that serves the meals to the rooms, and he came out on the 300 floor when he came out. That was my initial problem that I had, was I didn't know how he got to that floor, and I think me and Mark went through that, and we pretty well got it figured out.
I'm just gonna
you want me to share again?
No, hang on. I'm just trying to see if I can find a section of video
on the ABC story, or
Yeah, the one that you can blatantly tell that there was where we saw that mask, Mike. You see, if you remember, we were watching that video one night. You were watching it on your system. I was watching it on mine. We suddenly spotted the mask.
Yep.
If you want to,
I mean, see when it comes up. You share it.
I'm trying to find. I've not got that one on my system.
Okay. Mine's on the hard drive that's not hooked up to this particular.
Right, hang on then. Well, this is the genuine timestamp from the hotel security system. I do know this is genuine. This is of the shooter on the morning of the actual 1 October.
Okay.
This is so this is I mean, if you look at this guy, this is obviously the shooter right here interacting with a member of staff at 3:13 in the morning, and you can see the way the timestamp's formatted on the videos that Mike and I were looking at. These are actually masked on the elevator footage.
Now, there's also three different systems that Mandalay Bay uses to like I guess for lack of a better term would be their DVR section, and each one puts timestamps on in different spots. Some are up top, some are at the bottom. The elevators were done early on, so the elevator system was done when they built the building. Some of these other cameras were installed later.
Yeah, and it's that's another timestamp. I'm just trying to. I thought I had one of. Someone asked about the ABC footage. So yeah, I mean, if Mike, if you want to get the footage up from the ABC documentary,
and it's called was a shooter on the 32nd floor, I think they're calling it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to.
Give me a moment. I'm dropping hard drives.
Let me have a look at my photos, see what I've got in there.
Okay, here we go. The full documentary, and open this up. Hang on. Share. Boom. Audio as well. There we go.
Grounds tell a tragic story.
I'm going to get to that footage here.
There you go. I think that was there, Mike.
Right on.
3 minority victims. Who would target this person? Are these connected?
Call 911 if you see
Somehow I
anything
went to
out
a
of
different
place.
show.
We have packages in trucks rolling down the interstate.
We didn't know how big and bad this could become.
It's time to be.
All right, try this again. It's right around there.
Everybody get here, okay?
All right, here we go.
So if you need to play a little bit, Mike, because of the timestamp.
I'm going to explain what this is. This scene here is not the real scene. This was a setup scene, and I called ABC and argued with them about that because nowhere on here does it say this is a reenactment. And that made me mad. So this scene you're about to see, ABC filmed with Jesus, and you'll see why in just a minute. Pay attention to the top of this rack right here, and you'll see on the real footage something totally different.
October 1st, 2017. Mandalay Bay security officer Jesus Campos is on a routine security check.
So, Mike, this is the actual footage. If you pause it as he goes, if you could just get rid of this bottom box on the screen a second with the questions.
Want me to go full screen?
Yeah, go full screen. You can't. Yeah, on mine, all you've got is a question.
I have to go with one that. I've got to go with one that has a shorter. Here, I'll do this. Watch this. Dot, boom, enter, and then I'll just highlight mine. There we go.
You can't really see the bottom of because the way you've got the screen set, Mike. Oh, yeah. So yeah, if you look, if you go up to where the date is, Mike.
Hang on. I can make it like that.
It's perfect. Right there. If you see right there, that's the mask.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it up a bit more, Mike, on your cursor. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can see it comes out to here. If you notice, if you bring this into any of the photo editing software, you can see the mask comes all the way here. All of this has been added in. This elevator is called S10, and it shows on the actual elevator footage. It shows what it is. So this is all bullshit added later.
assigned to a room alarm on the 32nd
Yeah, that's just that frame would be fine, Mike. We just it was just to show the fact that none of the systems were synced up, so they really couldn't tell you what time he entered that elevator. But his cell phone records can, because he was texting on his phone at one point in
exactly
during the night.
Yep, that is true.
And it's mysterious that it's believed that he never handed his phone over for them to check the timestamps on the text messages.
Yeah, because I've never, but that was one of the early on questions of trying to match the timestamps, because he said he went into that foyer area, and then he called because he didn't want to tie up the radio, and so he called down to his, I guess for lack of a better term, his internal dispatch or whatever, on his cell phone. But yeah, having those records would have been really cool, because it would have been accurate time, because that's done by the atomic clock. All right.
Okay. Any more questions?
Let's see here. If we've missed something and we haven't answered it, you can ask it again. No problem. Or just tell us to look, because again, if you don't do it in all caps, I don't really know to look at it. I think sometimes you guys are talking amongst yourselves or forgetting.
Who occupied the Four Seasons? I'm just looking through to see if we missed anything.
Oh yeah, there's David. When you check the employment at Four Seasons, they hire separately. That is correct. When I and hey, here's some inside information for you. When I initially hacked into the employee system, for the lack of a better term, we'll just call it that. Jesus was not using his actual name, which is why they said that he was removed from the employment system. He wasn't removed. They literally just changed his name to his middle name, which was Angel. So that was his name on the employment screen. So if you logged in to look for his hours or anything like that, or what level of security it was, it wouldn't show. They wiped him from the system, but they didn't wipe him from the system. They simply changed his name, which effectively did the same thing.
Yeah. So Mike, if you see Al's comment about the phones being wiped by the FBI before they were sent back to their owners, the reason for that is because next comment down. There you go. The reason all phones were wiped by the FBI from anyone who submitted them from inside the venue was because of the footage. They didn't want it, getting leaking out and everything else. Because again, a lot of people were selling footage for a lot of money. Not the survivors, obviously, but other people. And they were just trying to protect certain victims. Now, but Campos, if you actually read Campos's transcripted interview, his phone rings in that interview. Yes, without permission, they're legally allowed to do that for the victim's protection. It's a stupid. I mean, it's not a stupid law in some respects. It's and again, a lot of issues as well. Don't forget, iPhones, when you put the wrong code in 3 or 4 times, it wipes the whole phone anyway. So, Now
that same question was brought up by Kathleen Lombardo early on, and she had between 13 and 20 clients that once she heard that, she called them, and a couple of them had already shown her the video after they got it back from the FBI. So the FBI didn't wipe everybody's phone. In fact, we could only one of her clients out of the I'm pretty sure, I think it was 13 that brought the phones up there actually had their phone wiped. So that story is kind of hit or miss as to if they actually wiped them or not. But I know that out of those people, there's only one that it appeared that it was possibly wiped. I tried to get a hold of one of the phones. Someone, I think, someone on here, I don't know if it was David or not, but somebody was going to send me their phone so I could get into that section. But I never received the phone. But anyway, another story. Locks the phone. Yeah, it locks the phone up. It doesn't wipe it. But Alan, actually, you can set it to wipe it. If someone enters the wrong X number of times, you can make your phone wipe the phone, and it actually does a wipe. It's not like when you delete things on a computer, you don't actually delete it. It just tells the computer they can write files there. What when a phone gets wiped, it actually reads and writes over that section many times so that you can't really get into it. What's story, Alan? Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Trying to catch up here. Oh, that's right. Yeah, CL has her girlfriend's phone and never looked at it after that night.
Alan, if you've got an iPhone, if you genuinely go into the security settings, you can set it so, as Mike just described, that it completely wipes the data if you put the wrong password in. Mine's actually set to 2 times. So that's why they brought out facial recognition and stuff like that, because people were genuinely forgetting their passwords.
Friends don't let friends buy iPhones, so get a real phone, get you an Android, get a. We had that argument earlier.
I'll buy an Android when you get a better truck.
Yeah, okay. Hey, well, that just so you know, that truck was gifted to me by a survivor. So, thanks to her. That's Michelle, by the way. Michelle actually gave me that truck. So, yeah. So you're going off on a survivor. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that truck was something else. He never fails to mention the truck. Every conversation we have, every time he texts or whatever, I could show you the phone right now. Says something about the truck. It's kind of funny. It's kind of, I guess, an ongoing joke between us.
Yeah, you have to be there.
Hit Alt and F4. If you're on a computer, hit Alt and F4 and see what happens. But don't you do it, Mark? You'll flip out of here.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm looking for only one was reported to have been erased, but no evidence of being true. Yeah, that was all I could find too, Alan. I could not find any supportive evidence that phones were actually, the act of wiping them was actually done. I couldn't find any, unless Mark, did you find some?
I found evidence that some phones may have been wiped. But again, as you know, Mike, with everything to do with Route 91, you've got to cut through everything and then get to the bottom of it and try and figure it out from there.
Now, here's something that I've been asking since day one. Probably will never get if Michelle's. That's right, Michelle left. The footage from the shack, the security shack, that was on the venue, is separate footage from everything else. It's from CSC, and they had several cameras around the venue. If you go to the venue now, you'll see some of the cameras that were kind of there, and they're just little. Actually, it's kind of, well, I don't know if you can see that. There. I don't know if you can see my. I'm not even on the screen. Hang on.
No, neither am I. I'm just. I know which cameras you're on about.
This one right here. It's kind of like these hanging down. This is the one I put internal to this office, but and they hang down. They have a dome that goes over.
Yeah, Mike, hang on. I'll share my screen. Hang on. I've got one. I've got one.
I've got another one here too.
No, I've actually got a picture of the.
Yeah, a picture of the actual thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is the. If you share it on, there you go. These cameras here.
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's what's around there. Some were there that night, and some weren't. They put some up afterwards. This one, I believe, was there that night. But the footage that these take, we may never see that footage because that footage is incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
And yes, I did see a section of it, but that was only because I was in a position at the time to see it. But yeah, it's pretty devastating to see what's on that. But there were 7 cameras that were specifically set up around the stage area. There's 12 to 20 some odd cameras that are around the whole venue, and the shack is still there. The security shack is actually still on the property. In fact, you can see it in one of the videos where I fly around. I actually fly the drone to the shack, and the guy comes out of the shack. But anyway, so that footage is probably, again, not going to be seen. But the thing is they never even mentioned that it was there. Like it's almost like it never existed to begin with. That's part of the MGM/Las Vegas LVMPD cover-up. And that anytime you ask for something, if they never mention that it exists to begin with, they just keep it quiet. So when I ask for it, I say I'm specifically asking for the video footage from the security shack that was inside the venue the night of October 1. And what do I get back? Nothing. Literally not even a "we don't have that." I get no response at all. It's probably because my picture and Ramsey's picture is up on the wall in that room there. But yeah, so who knows?
Yeah, so yeah. There was rumor of just someone being mistaken. We've seen no evidence of anyone being okay. Just see if there's any more.
Did you get into the door report or any of that mess?
No, the actual locking mechanism on the door, or the door that was fired through by the shooter. Which one are you on about?
Basically, I think what the controversy was oh God, I almost said his real name. UFO Hunter UK had done an in-depth report on the door interaction report that basically had some contradictions as to which was open or closed, and if Paddock was on the outside, how could the door possibly open for the other side? So there's some area of contention there. I went through that report myself. There's Hunter UK right there. Guys, I mentioned it, and boom, there he is. So Hunter, if you want to bring up exactly what the areas were, that would be you're welcome to do so. I didn't get too far into the report because what I was coming up with is stuff kind of matched, and then that was Hunter's thing. So I didn't want to get into it.
I've never seen Hunter's report, to be quite honest. The only ever reports I've seen on the lock interrogation, it is one was in the FIT report, and one was handed to me by someone else.
Right.
And
I did a video in the room 32219. I was showing how the doors between the two rooms operated, because a lot of people thought there was some sensor between the two rooms. There's absolutely no sensor on any of the doors that interlock between the two rooms.
Right.
Only the door that goes to the hallway has a sensor on it, and I showed how the lock worked, and how you could pull it. And
Mike, have you got Hunter's report? Because I'd be interested to see that and see
if you want, I can shoot Hunter your email address so he can send it over, unless he can put a link up in here.
He's getting ready for work.
Yeah, Hunter. If you want, I can. I think I've got Hunter's information, so I'll send it to you, and then you guys can chat.
I imagine he's with a name like that. I'd imagine he's in the UK.
He is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it'd be 5 a.m. in the UK right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but would be interested to see his analysis of the locking mechanism.
Yeah. Now he's done absolutely an in-depth report on this, so he's gone into it way more than anyone I've ever seen. So he's got some good insight in there. So definitely take a look at that. And I'll shoot you his email address, or him yours, either way, and you guys can hook up.
Hunter, you are correct. I stand corrected. It is 4:15.
Proof that he's in the UK.
No, I'm on the East Coast at the minute. Normally, I'm in Texas. So
I'm on the East Coast with him there.
So I'm normally 6 hours behind the UK.
UK in the house.
Yeah, so.
All right, so we'll wind this down, guys. I'm sure some more stuff will come up down the road. Mark, hopefully he'll come back on board with us, especially as he gets closer to the time that his book comes out. Yes, I'm writing a book too, and I might be writing a book with another individual who you all know, but until we get some other details worked out, we'll mention that. And we'll get into some other aspects. And I'll let everybody know at some point in time, but I am working the Tiger King case. Just so everybody knows, I'm working on that. I have unprecedented access to evidence that no one else has, and that will be made known probably next week. I'm trying to, going to bring the shows back up like I used to do. Try to do a show at least every Wednesday. Yes, Saint, I will leave this page up. You guys can come back to it. I do need more crayons. Yes, Alan, please send me crayons. Thank you, CL. I appreciate all of you. Mark, if you got anything else you want to say there as I wrap this up?
No, just thanks everyone for their time. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to talking to you all again when my book's released in the next couple of, hopefully a couple of couple of 3 weeks, I hope, Mike.
There you go. Well, that'd be good. Well, hopefully we'll get that other thing that you need for the book done the next few days. I believe we'll be able to do that.
Okay.
All right, guys. With Mark, I appreciate that. Guys, thank you for dropping by. As I always tell you guys, hug the person next to you because you never know when you might lose them. So make certain you do that. And we will see you around, and I will come up with a much more snappier close at some point in time. But I'll try to do more shows. Some I'll do some short, quick ones or whatever. And if anyone's into Tiger King, you're going to see some crazy stuff come out of here really quick on that. So stay tuned. Appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Cheers, guys.
All right, guys.